we should be live now. So, Blue, welcome. Uh, Thank you for joining me again for helping to commentate a top 8 this time. Interesting that we're going to top 8 for this season instead of top 16 for the past two.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a separation and top cut from the Swiss, especially for something setting up online. Um, Obviously, it should be a little bit quicker this time, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I do think there's a there was a slightly lower participation, not by much. I think the last two have had about 50, between 54 and 56 participants. This one had 44, I believe, 42 or 44. Um, it is the holiday season. A lot of people are getting busy, and also I know I am getting more excited as for Trial by Frost as we continue on. It's a month and a half away, so I think that does. I'm looking forward so much that I am not focusing on the present of Altered as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's usually the tendency for a lot of folks for any new card game or card game where you see some of the new stuff pop up and then you're trying to see what else you can set up for that, especially with all the not the leaks, but every spoiler coming out recently from PAX U and then people paying attention to the Discord and checking things out. So, um, not too surprising, but still happy with the turnout. I'm sure we'll have a lot of good matches to commentate this time around.
Yeah, interesting. You know, we have 3 Sigismar and 1 Aonis. Last time for top 16, we had 5 and 5 of each. So Aonis seeming to uh, sort of dip a bit in Top Cut, but we have 2 Tasias and 1 Nevenka.
Yeah, it as far as like the breakdown in general, I believe coming into the tournament as a whole, there was a little bit of a difference as far as total heroes and everything. Still a lot of Sigismar and as far as the same as before, but I think there was a little bit less on Afanis, if I remember correctly, as far as like conversion from the Swiss to the top 8 or in the top cut in this scenario. So um, it's not too hard to believe. Maybe I expected a little bit more Faunus to make it, but not too surprised as far as the Sigmar is concerned. And realistically, it's nice having a somewhat even breakdown
Yeah.
across the factions. Obviously, nothing with Bravos, but that's kind of to be expected. With I think there was only one Basira in
Yep.
the total event, but yeah.
Yeah, one Basira, and then for Lyra we had 1 Nevenka who is in top 8, and then 1 Fen. Uh, but we've seen overall in past celebrations and tournaments in general, Tasia have a pretty strong representation, but not in the beginning, but not able to make it to top cut. And this time it's 25% of our top cut.
Yeah, it's interesting. As far as Tasia is concerned, it's a weird one for me because I think we've seen Tasia pretty consistently throughout all of the major events, whether they be in person or online, and the conversion rate for the hero hasn't been the greatest in comparison to others. So maybe we're just getting into a scenario where people are finally figuring it out a little bit, and I've seen a few wins for a different few online weekly tournaments for Tasia. Um, but nothing as far as like these separated Swiss and top cut type of tournament. So maybe this will be the one where we finally see it pulled out and see quite a few good uniques coming from them that just anchor everything.
Yeah, I can say that when I've been playing on BGA, I've been seeing a huge increase in specific Tasia uniques that just end up anchoring everything. Do you think the stronger representation recently of Tasia is due to those uniques? And does that mean Tasia as a hero is more reliant on uniques than, say, other heroes?
Um, I think it's more so just folks finally getting the uniques that they've been looking for, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first half of our meta was kind of dominated a little bit by everyone searching for certain types of Ortis uniques a little bit,
Yeah.
and trying to make those work, and not as much figuring out on the Tasia side of things and just using what you had a little bit. Um, so it's probably a little bit of a balance of that, and it also could be a variation of the meta. Honestly, with as much of Faunus as we have seen, and maybe this is as a result of there not being many Faunuses in general, um, that usually could be a fairly good counter to the Tasia matchup with the off you goes and everything, and getting rid of those anchored and like set up characters in that sense. Because there's not a lot of interaction in Tasia decks other than with your own characters as a whole, opposed to your opponent's characters. So they either have be able to get all their anchored out, be able to get all their boosts out, and hopefully they win, kind of thing. But then again, when they get encountered by something like any type of Ysmir deck that has like those off you goes, banishing gate, just stuff that has constant interaction with your opponent, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Whereas I think with when we have a lot of Sigmar, for example, in Ortis, yeah, there's teamwork training, but that's 3 spells out of an entire deck, and you don't see a lot of like sticky note seals being able to be interactable with those anchored characters that are 3 cost or less, kind of thing.
I will say, bringing up sticky note seals, that was a strong three of for most of the early meta before the Robin Hood errata. Um, there's still normally two in most Ortis lists, but with the removal, or not removal, but the change to Robin Hood, uh, we've seen that become less of a consistent three of across decks. So I think it's interesting. We had that instance of preparing to go against a bit of a taller deck, a higher cost. I mean, 4 isn't incredibly high cost, but now most removal again going back to focusing on 3 or less.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have removal in your deck regardless, and I think that's why we see the reduction of it from an Ortis perspective, because you're pretty much either looking at teamwork training, sticky note seal, and then we might see the occasional out of faction Keylon burst. But the sticky note seal just seems like a default because it is a common, and you don't have to use that rare slot
Yeah.
for Keylon burst, for example. I do occasionally see a Keylon burst in some Ortis decks. Never 3, it seems like, because you can't usually give up all 3 of those spots. But yeah, it's a bit odd one. It's a bit of an odd one for the Ortis decks, because you feel like you need the sticky note seal, even though you don't really see a lot of like 4 cost and above things to hit. I think most of the time you're probably looking at taking out permanents sometimes for like your Axiom matchup with like Sierra or Subash potentially. But other than that, I think the majority of, like, I guess, quote unquote meta stuff is usually like 3 cost or lower, and you might hit some like really good unique at 4 cost or higher sometimes, but that's probably why we see the reduction of it from a guaranteed 3 to maybe like 2 or 1.
Yeah, so pulling up the stats from the overall season 3 deck list, Sigismar, we had 16 Sigismars overall. All 16 had 1 sticky note seals. 15 of them had second sticky note seals, and then we have a huge drop in only 5 of those 16 having the third. So still, uh, you know, last season there we had a bit more. We had, I think, all of them were guaranteed 2s, and then about half of them had the third. And the season before that, it was full 3s for almost everyone, I believe, if I remember correctly. Now, teamwork, as you're saying, teamwork training, incredibly strong card for Oris. Still at almost guaranteed 3 of in Sigmar. Everyone was running 2, and then 15 out of 16 were running the third.
Yeah, I gotcha. I do think we are getting into the game though on the stream, I believe. We can take a look at. Let's see.
Hold on. My one is having some trouble, so I'm gonna try and just change this real quick. So we can get into the game.
Yeah, no worries. Looks like we do have a Sigmar and Tasia matchup, a bit of the heroes that we were talking about.
There we go. That should work for now. Yeah, we have Sigmar and Tasia. I think we see the rare mana eruption in Tasia's hand, which how do you feel about mana eruption versus mana reaping as removal?
It's interesting. I've been messing around with like the differences between like the common and the rare and like Bravo stacks. Not so much in Muna. I feel like we don't see mana eruption as much, just because it does take up that slot there a little bit. I do actually like mana eruption more in general sometimes. I feel like mana reaping has its benefits too because you don't lose the mana yourself. But it does obviously help out your opponent for future turns, so you kind of usually tend to save it for like in game a little bit opposed to later on. But at the same time, mana reaping is usually more helpful when you have some level of ramp. So I tend to think mana eruption. I tend to think when you run mana eruption that you probably should run some ramp. I'm not sure if Franco Rico does that in their deck, as far as like the tiny gens. But I guess we could take a look at that.
Let's see. For
It doesn't look like
Nico
it.
has no instances of ramp that I can see. Is just running the 1 of mana eruption.
That's probably why then. Yeah.
And 3 mana reapings. So
yeah. That makes sense then. They'd probably just wanted another one-off of some type of interaction and removal in their deck, kind of like what we were talking about before, where Muna is a little bit low on that. So it's not too far out there. It looks like they run a one of Beauty Sleep as well. So just to have a total of like 5 removal / interactable with opponent characters and permanents in their deck. So not too surprising there, I guess. But if they were to run more than just the one, I'd imagine they would have to have some type of ramp and almost do kind of like a Hydra rampish-esque Tasia deck, but we don't really see that a lot in the meta at the moment, more so just to focus on anchored and boosting plants a little bit.
now, for Nico does have, one of those has a Lyra Cloth Dancer unique that says when a character you control gains 1 or more boosts, up to 1 target character with hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. So it does have one of those anchored uniques Our other Tasia, who's in the top 8, um, Kuroana, has,
Hmm.
I believe, 2 or even 3 of those, if I, last time I checked, 2 that anchor when uh, characters either come into play or gain boosts. So, and we see a lot of boost cards in Nico's deck. We have Chirons, Ogans, Lyra Thespian, both the 2 Yongsu Verdant Weavers, both that give boost to characters. So it seems like a very sort of just try to overwhelm the board with stats and boosts in the early to mid game.
Yeah, it's seems like the typical setup for a lot of Tasias these days. Um, it is interesting. I always find it interesting, for example, with the Sigismars, to see the inclusion of the common uh, frog princes as well. It shows just like a lot of Sigismars have gone towards like a more, not necessarily an aggro setup, or more of like a tempo setup of just getting as much higher stats in certain categories and playing them in the right times kind of thing, you know? Whereas, I mean, we saw the Frog Princes a lot with Warus, right? But I
Yeah.
think we saw them most often as, I think, rares and a few times in commons, just to have that additional bureaucrat that you could throw out there in case someone decided to mess up, try to mess up your hero power play and like remove one of your slept bureaucrats. You always had that one cost Frog Prince available for you on occasion, just to put it out there and sleep it to make sure you got that token the next turn, right? So I think I don't know if I haven't looked at all the deck lists remaining in the top 8, but I feel like a good amount of them will have those Frog Princes as well. And we do have an even matchup here on the Tumult, with Sigmar going up early, but as Tasia does when they're able to get more anchored and more boosted characters out there, able to catch up, especially when they don't get them removed.
Uh, just in terms of overall stats of the Frog Prince, I don't have for the top 8, the 3 in our top 8, but
Hmm.
15 we're running 15 out of the 16 we're running one Frog Prince, 12
Yeah,
out of the 16 we're running a second, and 10 out of the 16 we're running a third.
yeah.
Mostly commons. We saw about 2/3 commons, 1/3 rare, and then one unique across the board. Now, another thing I thought was very interesting is we started seeing a bit more bureaucrats in general in Sigismar,
Hmm.
in Monolith Legate and Ortis Attorney. Not anything too uh like meta shifting, but we did have 7 out of the 16 Sigismars running at least one rare Ortis Attorney,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
11 running 2 Monolith Legates.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of expected the uh Legate a little bit, because realistically, without it in your unique slot, Ortis kind of runs low on sabotage. They have the spy, which is a great sabotaging character. Um, as we see a 1/1 there on the tumult and getting 2 advances away for both heroes. Um, uh, Great sabotaging character, but the faction as a whole doesn't have extensive ability to sabotage. Um, and so I think that's probably why we see Legat a little bit. Um, and as far as the attorney, though, I honestly haven't ran into it too much, and maybe that's why we see it on the lower end, comparably with, you said 7, I believe.
Yep.
Um, but it makes sense. Card draw in Altered, as is most card games, I think, is always a good thing. The more resources in hand and in your reserve, the better. Um, so I guess if you don't have that set up in like your unique slot, for example, it would be good to have it in an additional character, even if it takes up the rare slot. And I think if you are going to run attorney, you have to run the rare, no matter if
Yeah.
it's through Waru or in this case Sigmar.
We also saw a fair amount of monolith rune scribes, the common version, which is just vanilla 222.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it interesting when I see that as opposed to the legate, because legate's a 2-1-2, so one less stat, but has the potential to sabotage. Uh,
Yeah,
so so I always find it interesting when players opt out of the legate in order to just have that one extra mountain stat.
yeah, it is interesting, and maybe it's just a stat distribution thing that they're trying to accomplish, that you can check when you're building decks, obviously.
Yep.
Um, a- Anytime you can get a full stat distribution across the board for the cost, when the cost is the same, it feels nice, especially when you're running like things like the Frog Prince and potentially Gatekeeper. Um, where the stats are a little bit lopsided and you want a little bit more consistency, it doesn't hurt, I think, is the situation that you're looking at. And yeah, the one stat is a little bit off, but sometimes just one stat matters. A lot of time people focus on the idea of having these huge characters and you can win by like 6 or 8 in an expedition, but realistically, all you have to do is win by one and it counts the same, right? Um,
Yeah.
so maybe it's a little bit of that, and obviously these players are playing a lot and they're doing testing to see what feels best for them, and it potentially can turn into that. I do like the monolith rune scribe. I tend to think it's realistically like the only source of resupply if you run the rare kind of thing. Um, but just as far as a general like common stat stick, it doesn't hurt with the 222. Um, and it's essentially just like a common spy played from the reserve, right? But you can play it twice between from hand and reserve for that 2 cost in general.
Yeah.
We are getting to the end of this game here with Fernica Rico in the lead here with that anchored Dracana, and on the tumult. Pretty even though as far as like hand and reserve resources. The Sigismar has been holding on to a removal throughout the entire game with that teamwork training, so I imagine it's going to be coming up big here, trying to let them use as much setup on their characters as possible, but all while having to work around the Moon Bastion as
Yeah.
well.
I find
But
it
yeah,
interesting that he's still holding on to the teamwork training given that the spindle is up. Because that. Oh, see. Playing it here to get rid of that Lyra Thespian. Important to note that because the uh, Tasia's ability has already gone off, that second Lyra Thespian will not see two characters that have a boost.
yeah, that's probably what they're setting up to. I think even with like a permanent like the Moon Bastion, you always have to keep that removal available to you and just take the hit at some point. Because if you don't, then there's no way to remove a big enough stat stick. It doesn't look like they'll be able to catch up anyway here, but they had to take the chance and see what they could do.
Yep. Now, that was a close game overall. We saw uh, the Sigismar take an early lead, as they are often like to do. Even though Tasia is also has a pretty strong early game, but then Tasia able to just claw back and win the game.
Yeah, I think it kind of came down to the idea of the Sigismar not being able to utilize that teamwork training as they
Mm-hmm.
would have liked, as far as like efficiency mana wise, because as soon as that the spindle Moon Bastion gets out there, it becomes mana efficient to not being mana efficient at all, kind of thing, from 2 cost to 4 cost, depending on the character. And it doesn't feel as good, and that's kind of where we run into a little bit of the weakness in the typical meta decks for Ortis at the moment, where there isn't a whole lot of permanent removal for that lower cost, right? So if you're not advancing, getting far enough ahead to the point of where you can start ignoring characters and just advance on one side, for example, because you're already ahead, then you get more and more worried about those permanents, whether they be the spindle or even havens or something to that effect, because unless you have a unique that has some type of permanent removal, you're probably not going to get rid of it, and which means you're probably not going to get rid of those anchored and boosted characters, especially in the Tasia matchup.
Yeah, uh, as you mentioned earlier, um, Kellen Burst being the only real removal for the spindle or permanents that cost less than 3 or less, as opposed to Sticky Note Seal, which is 4 or more. And uh, Kellen Burst also hits 4 or less, but Sticky Note
Yeah,
Seal already has 4 covered.
right.
And that's a rare slot that I one of the things I find most interesting about Altered is because of the rarity system, your decision making in deck building, you have to figure out, what do I want to use my 15 rare slots on. In other card games, you can just be like, all right, I'm going to throw all the most powerful cards in the deck that I can. But there's this deck building restriction that you have to play around in Altered. And you have to decide what works best for my deck in, the most variety of matchups. And those rare slots are incredibly valuable.
It's true, and a lot of the times, and especially without like a side deck kind
Yeah.
of thing, you have to figure out a way to balance your deck in a way to where you can't just target one type of matchup. I feel like you have to obviously prioritize towards what you believe the meta is, and in this case, where you can evaluate deck lists and everything and see a general expectation of what things are going to be. Um, you have an idea of what things are going to do, which way things are going to happen. And so you just have to do the best you can in that aspect. Um, and you can't really account for everything. So you're going to into some matchups that you're not going to have the advantage on just based off of like deck lists sometimes. And you just have to know the strategy that you gives you the best opportunity to win, and just go for it. And if you don't hit the correct cards or if you don't get the correct play, take advantage of the best of three, right?
Yeah.
And try to hit it the next time. So I don't think any particular hero is disadvantaged too much going into another hero in their deck list. I think the worst one that we saw once upon a time was the War versus Trace matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honestly, I don't think that matchup is nearly as bad anymore. I think worst situation that we're seeing is maybe like 60-40s, so
Yeah.
on and so on, which I think is realistically good for the meta. And at this point, it's not so much individual matchups as it is just consistency of your decks and which hero can put out the most consistency and which deck list can put out the most consistency.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I think that's sort of the name of the game. You want to have 60-40 matchups. You don't want to have matchups that go too far beyond that. Yes, certain archetypes are going to be better against other archetypes, but you don't want to just feel that as soon as you sit down, you can't do anything.
True, and I think at this point there's it also goes into the idea of like which unique effects you think are working the best. Like, do you want to prioritize unique effects that you think are going to be implemented through your opponent's strategy, or do you want to prioritize the ones for your own strategy. Like, do you expect your opponent to draw a lot of cards, so you want to find that uh, Quetz effect on your unique, because there's a few of them that do that. Or
Yep.
in the case with Ortis, you see a lot of the token generation effects um, for non-character tokens played in your expedition kind of thing, and just going wide, and it's doesn't feel good to have to remove a token or a character that's small statted when there's like 7 or 8 tokens out there, right? So yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't think there's an inherently like I said before, like worse matchups as a whole. It's just how you play, and it's kind of the beauty of the game as in general, where it's like, yeah, it's a lot of variation in how you play, and you can look back at your matchups and figure out where you potentially messed up and where you had a better statistical play as a whole. And we do see like one of the rare monolith rune scribes that we were talking about instead in common, but now there's one of those rares that allow you to resupply that I think is an interesting play a lot of the time, because like I mentioned, there's not that much resupply in general
Yeah.
in Ortis. Because typically you want to play everything from hand, but anytime you have some variation of deck thinning, I don't think it hurts. And we do see the Sigmar going up early here, using that Sandman to their advantage. Probably one of the best counters for anchored characters in general, other than just straight up removal, right?
Yeah.
So,
And we've seen a huge increase in Sandman in Sigismar decks. Uh, and that right there was just a great instance of seeing what Sandman can do. It basically nullified the extra mana that Tasia paid to give Aloe Vera anchored, and was able to cause a double advance.
yep. Um, One of those things where you know it's going to be out there anyway, may as well just have it have less stats. And obviously, you're not going to give it the the stat boost that you would for your own characters, for example. Um, but yeah, and it helps you get that 2-0, get up early, and realistically take advantage of the lead. I assume in this scenario, unless we see like some counter double advances from the Tasia, that we might see that Grand Endeavor get in played uh, by Neuro on the Sigismar. I believe they are running 3
They
in their
are,
deck list,
and
um, which we've
that's
seen
a strong
increase.
choice.
Yeah, which we've seen increase from last time. I believe they were only running 1 or 2 before. So it makes it seem to me that they've seen a lot of success with that permanent in particular, um, and then decided to keep on adding more because they were getting up early and they felt comfortable in the tempo loss and setting that up, and just being maybe like 2 advances or maybe 3 at the most kind of thing away from winning. And it's basically a uh, ticking clock for your opponent, right? So um, we'll see how that goes for him.
All right, we had, I don't know, I had was having some issues with the stream, so I cut away for a second.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was going out there a little bit, but I think we're back.
yeah. Uh, I I want to talk about Grand Endeavor because I think it's very interesting. Um, Sigismar is great at getting ahead early, and then sure, you take a huge tempo loss when you play Grand Endeavor, but just put your opponent on the clock. It's the only landmark with tough. It has tough too when you upgrade it to the rare, so it's gonna make it hard for your opponent um to combat it, and you're okay with them taking a double advance that turn to guarantee advance every single turn after, especially when you are already at a 2 expedition lead. I think it's a very interesting card. 3 of, in my opinion, seems like a lot. I like, it feels, I don't know. My instinct is to say that's a 2 of um card. I love a cheeky 1 of, so that like I was running in my Sigismar deck one Grand Endeavor, but I mean Neuro's a better player than me, so maybe they got that spice.
Yeah, so we're gonna run into a situation here where we did see a 2-0 advance from the Tasia, but Neuro was able to get a 1 of advance,
Mm-hmm.
and they are coming into a 6 cost potential Grand Endeavor turn. So it comes into an idea here of where you're kind of doing a little bit of mental math of, is it worth playing the 6 cost here, um, and getting 2-0'd regardless kind of situation, and they'll be 2 advances away, but you'll be 2 advances away guaranteed as well, assuming they don't have the removal for it. They do have. He knows there's 3 cards in hand. We know there's not the removal there, but it'll be interesting to see if they decide to take the risk here, especially since we're probably going to see a well, I mean, realistically, unless they pay just 1 cost for a character, and we see like a 2 or 3 cost, he'll be free to play the Grand Endeavor because he knows there won't be a removal to take it out, other than potentially a rare um, mana eruption, right?
Yeah, there is the one of rare mana eruption,
Yeah.
but seeing that there's only 4 mana up instead of 5 means that it's a 1 in 39 cards that removes Grand Endeavor, as opposed to 4 with the mana reapings. Um, and I don't know. I feel like at this point, I feel like I would feel okay going for the Grand Endeavor because then you just have um put your opponent on a clock and you just have to win. You really just have to win one expedition the next day in order to win, because you'll get the one advancement at noon the
Mm.
following day, and then another at again the following day at the following noon. So winning one expedition will get you those 3 expedition wins that you need, that Neuro still needs. I want to check real quick and see what that Ortis Gatekeeper does. So Ortis Gatekeeper, from anywhere, if you control the token resupply, so has that monolith rune scribe ability on the Ortis Gatekeeper, and then it has the Quetzalcoatl. When your opponent draws 1 or more cards or does resupply, create an Ortis Recruit Soldier token in your other expedition.
Yeah, we saw him kind of debating a little bit there between playing that or the Grand Endeavor. Um, I think that's kind of the decision of like what you have available to you at that time. Do you feel is like the more efficient way to move forward and potentially win the match? Do you feel like you have enough to get ahead here and win the game? Um, Realistically, if you could hit that 2-0, um, it would put him in a really good spot. Probably not the situation we're looking at here, but he's definitely going to advance at least one
He
expedition, but
he
we'll see.
actually can get the 2-0 if he sleeps the Dracana.
I don't think he
Um,
wants. I think he wants to sleep the aloe
the
vera potentially. Yeah,
the aloe vera would be the like would be the more value target, but
but
sleeping the Dracana would get Neuro 2 advancements, although it would also give Franco 1 advancement.
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what he does here. If he does that and he assumes that uh, the Fernico doesn't have that removal for the um, the Grand Endeavor, then we would be looking at a 1-1 setup here. But he's going to slow play him a little bit and then play that Sandman, it looks like.
Oh.
Okay, he's not going to go for the 2-0 here. He's going to sleep
Oh.
his own character.
He's
Sorry.
sleeping his own character. So that way, he'll get 2 Ortis recruits next turn. One from Franco drawing, and then one from the resupply from Aloe Vera. So that Sandman was a total of 4 stats this turn. The 2 boosts that Ortis Gatekeeper is getting, and then the 2 Ortis recruits that can be
Yeah.
only be put in the opposite expedition of Ortis Gatekeeper. So those will be going in the companion expedition.
Yeah, playing the game of keeping stats out on the board with Tasia. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. We do see him step away from any Grand Endeavor play by manaing it, and probably for the best, especially since we see the mana eruption getting drawn by the Tasia. Obviously, he doesn't know that, but we do. So great play on both sides there.
And we see Neuro now hovering over teamwork training, saying, I see that rare Spindle Muna Bastion in reserve now. Should I prioritize getting this teamwork training off just to get value off of it before it costs 2 more? If he does, Aloe Vera would get discarded and is a good target. But
Yeah,
now just looking at the Baba Yaga, still has 4 mana up if they decide to use the teamwork training. Also, I think for Nico, I don't know. Spindle doesn't feel like a great tempo play. It does. Yeah. It does help keep your characters on board, but you are fighting for your life right now in the expeditions. So, and it doesn't have any board presence right away.
Yeah. So for Neuro, it's one of those situations where you see the card out on the reserve and it feels like you have to set up your plays for it, kind of thing. And a lot of the times your opponent isn't ever intending to actually play it, kind of thing, just using it as like a preventative measure, kind of thing. So he decides to take the risk, play the Baba Yaga, and then we see an equal risk being taken by Fernico playing the Tracina without the Muna Bastion out, and we see the immediate removal. No time to think about it. Like, I'm good. I'll play it immediately. He does have the availability to play one more. Fernico doesn't know that's available to them, and is looking to play that unique Yangsu. It looks like.
Yeah. So that Yangsu, if from hand, if you control 2 or more plants, which Fernico does, target character gains 3 boosts.
So it'll look like it'll set him up here for a 2-0, but obviously we know that teamwork training is available, so we're likely looking at a 1-1 setup here.
Yeah.
Which will put Neuro adjacent, and Fernico will have no anchored characters going into the next day, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And it looks like we went black there.
Yep. I'm gonna cut away from that for right now. We will get the game back up as soon as it's available. Great, it just came back.
Looks like
don't have to look at our big mugs anymore.
Yeah, there we go. Looks like we did end up going 1-for-1 there. So.
Yeah, it looks like Neuro played the Ortis Cadets from reserve in order to win the Hero expedition. It looks like because that is what advanced for.
Yeah.
For Neuro.
Able to hold on to the teamwork training for future reference, just for potentially this last turn here. I not sure if we see the Spindle getting played from Fernico, just as a preventative measure for that teamwork training. Obviously, it's not going to feel good, especially without any anchored characters already out there. But it looks like with 8 mana, the best plays as far as mana consumption is not going to allow the Spindle. I don't think.
Yeah, the mana seems weird right now. Because Fernico doesn't really have great ways to utilize all their mana.
Yeah,
Um,
especially with no anchored characters. So
yeah, really for 8 you could aloe vera and anchor, and then play the Yongsu. The Yongsu from reserve does give up to 2 target characters each gain 2 boosts.
okay,
Uh, although as
looks like
soon
it's
as that aloe vera comes out, we're gonna see Ortis Spy
yeah,
uh, hit that Yongsu,
yeah,
and then it's just and then Fernico does have Ogun and Mana Eruption to use, or Ogun and Nurture, but I it doesn't see. But then the teamwork training
yeah.
just stops uh, whoever whoever Fernico really tries to target.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations where being able to see the hand kind of lets us know that Nero's kind of in charge at this point as far as like this potential final day here.
Yeah,
Especially being adjacent on the tumult, it's gonna be difficult for Nico to pull this one out, and we're likely to be going to a 1-in-1 total match setup here.
yeah. With the Ortis Gatekeeper play, uh, 3 different characters being on the hero expedition just means that there's no way Fernico can uh, attempt to advance, and Neuro has that teamwork training still in hand. So that will be going to a game 3, which always love to see game 3s.
Yep. Sounds quite good. And we'll see how it's set up. But yeah, fairly even matchup. I'm excited to see the game 3. Give me 1 minute, and I'm going to grab a little bit more water.
Sure. I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, for spending some time with us. If while we're in between games, please go and check out Blue Oak TV on YouTube. Does great interviews and tournament commentary. Subscribe to them. You should be able to click in the title, I believe. It should take you to their page. I'm not 100% sure on that. But while Blue's away, I'm going to just give a little shout out so that you all, just to make you all aware. I am going to check real quick and see if any of our other matchups have reported their wins. We do not have currently any matches reported into the semifinals. So we're still all in our game, our not game ones, but our quarterfinal matches. Although we do, according to this, we do see Spiritus's Sigismar leading 1-0 against Silver Jay's Traced, and Helfer's Nevenka leading 1-0 over Kuroana's Tasia. So Nevenka currently in the lead of their match. Very exciting to see. Rare Cuisine Sauce God, yes. As I just said, Nevenka is currently leading their quarterfinal match. take a look real quick at this is our top 8 breakdown. So 3 Sigismar, 2 Tasia, 1 Aonis, 1 Traced, and 1 Nevenka. Very exciting to see Nevenka. I think in season 2 of the ExAlts celebration, we didn't have a single Nevenka played. Let me double check, because that might be... No, we had 1 Nevenka played. And it is not the same Nevenka. Alright, looks like we're getting into game 3. 3 uniques in the opening hand for Neuro. Requisite, I have a local who said Nevenka was the Waru counter. Swore that Nevenka was the best way to play around Robin Hood. I played against them once with on their Nevenka with my Waru, and they did win. Not sure if that's statistically relevant, but still, it did seem to be a good. They did seem to know the matchup pretty well. All right, so we'll most likely see a Dracana play round 1 for our for Nico Artasia. We saw so this Sandman says from anywhere put a character to sleep, and then if you control 8 less than 8 mana orbs, resupply. Now we do see the sticky note seals in reserve, not a great resupply, just because that doesn't have huge uses in this matchup. It only hits Tasia's uniques. All of Fernico's uniques. No, 2 of Fernico's uniques, the Lyra Cloth Dancer and 1 of the Yongsu's, cost 4, but everything else is a miss for that sticky note seals. But with the sleep, he's able to get a good tempo to advance on turn 1, putting Sigismar at an early lead. We did see this in game 1, and Tasia was able to come back, but Sigismar does... the tempo that Sigismar has is incredibly powerful in the early game. The unique Ortis Cadets on Neuro's side says, when another non-token character joins your expeditions, create an Ortis Recruit soldier token in target expedition. So kind of working as in this instance, it would just be it would be the same value basically as as a regular Ortis Cadet, but you can choose where you want to put the soldier token after you see where your opponent puts stuff. Obviously has the ability to go higher in value the more cards you're able to play. We will not be able to play more than 2 characters this turn. Interesting to see Neuro decides to sleep the Ortis Cadets. Grand Endeavor flipped over. So hoping to get a lot of value off of this Ortis Cadet passive in the next round. And we have seen Neuro not shy away from um not shy away from sleeping their own characters in order to get benefits off their passives. Somewhat a kind of a Waru-esque Sigismar play. And Nico is able to answer back with a turn 2 double advance, tying up the expeditions, while still having a 3/3/3 Sneasel Shroom on board. We do see the Spindle from Nico. I would not be surprised if we saw Spindle plus Lyra Thespian this turn, or Dracana plus Lyra Thespian. The Spindle did a lot of work in game 1, just protecting characters from teamwork trainings. But seems like Nico does not want to lose any tempo with this powerful unique on the board. Opting for the Ogun, which is essentially a 4/3/3 for 2, because it gives its own stats plus 2 boosts for the 2 plants on the board. We should be able to see Neuro take a... Neuro take a match advancements. So moving forward 1, along with for Nico moving forward 1. I had the math slightly wrong because I forgot that Ortis Cadets would be creating a token. But that's 4 cards, I believe, in Neuro's reserve. The Sticky Note Seal going to be tossed most likely because there's no real use to it. Grand Endeavor does have some use, although we haven't seen Neuro play one in this matchup yet. Seems like that might be for slower matchups, and Neuro has to keep up the tempo, especially since Neuro and Nico are even on expeditions at this point. There is an interesting option in Neuro's deck. There is a 1 of Isatok, which I think is very interesting. We haven't seen it played yet. I'm not even sure if we've seen it drawn in these 3 games so far. But I would love to see that come into play and see if it has any effect on the game. For Nico having some a lot of 2 costs right now, so we'll have some good options for their turn, being able to play 3 of them. My current guess would be the Sneasel Shroom, Lyra Thespian, and the Chiron, but seems to be mana-ing the Spindle, and can leave the have the Kodama in back if Nico feels like they're already winning and doesn't need to commit more to the board, and can just get 3/3/3 for next turn. Lyra Thespian, I think, is an incredible card in Tasia. If you have 1 character from your previous turn, which you have a lot of anchored, so you're likely to have, Lyra Thespian can gain Tasia's boost and then see itself, so coming in for a 5/5/5 for 2. We do see Nico have to play the Chiron in order to still have Lyra Thespian be active. But looks like Fernico had the opportunity to stop Neuro from advancing, going going 1-for-0, but decides that the 3-3-3 for the following day is more valuable than keeping Neuro from advancing that turn. Now, we have Fernico has some interesting mana options now. Will have leftover mana. So if there's an Ortis spy, but Fernico is on the play, so Fernico can easily play the Chiron first, just to play around the Ortis spy, but then that does leave one of the characters. Oh. Lyra Thespian needs that Chiron in order to be active, because we do not have any boost from the previous turn. So we get our 1 boost from Tasia, and only Chiron can make Thespian active. And we're seeing one of the strengths of Sigmar's deck is just the access to card advantage and card draw. 3 Baba Yagas and 3 Ozmas on top of any resupply or a draw you may have from uniques just lets Sigmar play a great value game. I feel like Sigmar doesn't have the same synergy that a lot of other decks do. When I play Sigmar, I don't feel like I'm playing a well-oiled machine. I'm just playing a very consistent deck. When you play Trace and Rossum, you see a lot of synergy, and you're like, oh yes, the cards are all working together to create a game plan. Sigmar is just, I have very good cards, and I'm going to play them. I don't need to have I don't need any fancy bells and whistles. I have a good foundation. We see Neuro once again sleep that Ortis Cadet. Has 2 mana up to play the Frog Prince or the Teamwork Training. Lyra Thespian would be active and would allow Fernico to double advance. But then if Fernico plays the Lyra Thespian, we'll just see their Teamwork Training in response. Wow. Fernico just says, all right, I have the amount of value I need right now. I'm going to pass, keep my Lyra Thespian, because we see Fernico getting lower on cards. I think Fernico won't mana this turn. Will be able to play their entire hand with the 7 mana. Leaves them open to the most options. Interesting to see Neuro get rid of the Ortis Spy. Obviously, we have perfect information, so seeing that Ortis Spy could get rid of that Kodama and leave Fernico with a less mana efficient turn, but Neuro just doesn't find it valuable to play that out this turn, especially since um, teamwork training can remove the Kodama if needed. And it looks like that's what we're going to see happen right now. 4 mana left for Neuro, so we'll most likely see Sandman plus Frog Prince. Could try and draw a one of off of Baba Yaga, but probably better safe playing the two drops. Can't really. Can you play the Sandman in order to try to double advance? Lyra Thespian, importantly, not active. Neuro has done a very good job of making sure throughout the game that Lyra Thespian cannot be active, which is a very good read because Fernico has had Lyra Thespian in hand for I think 3 turns and just not able to do anything important with it. Will we see Fernico sleep something? But sleeping feels bad just because you're giving up advantage. Huh. Fernico trying to bait Neuro into playing the Sandman out. The Sandman in the companion expedition would seemingly let Neuro double advance and win the game, but the Beauty Sleep will answer that. But it'll be hard for Fernico to really keep up the value game. Especially since... Oh. What happened? Oh, no. Especially since Fernico will have 4 cards in reserve at the end of the turn if the Beauty Sleep is played, and have to discard down to 2. So, if I'm Neuro, I play out the Sandman. Just try to get rid of Fernico's resources. Seems to be taking... oh, excuse me. Seems to be taking some time making the decision, though. This is top 8. Our other top 8s, Helfer on the Nevenka has advanced, as well as ExAlts Brian on the Aonis. We're still waiting on ExAlt Spiritus and Silverjay. That is Sigismar versus Traced. And of course, this match right here.
What a board state to come back to.
Yeah. It's been a very interesting game to say the least.
Yeah, I had a bit of an issue to take care of there as far as a leak, but no worries, we're back now. And fun board state, they're even, but dang, that's a wide board for Neuro.
Yeah. Fernico will be able to survive one more turn.
Yeah, with the Beauty Sleep will help.
Yeah, we'll have to sleep either the Sandman or the sleeping in Oris recruit. Oh, I guess just saying I don't
It's
have the
not,
value and
yeah, no,
conceding the game.
yeah, doesn't think he's gonna make it through next turn, it seems like.
Wait, what?
How did he advance on?
Oh,
Was
because
he
there were
able to?
two frog princes.
Okay. Oh, he didn't have anything in
He,
Mountain then.
yeah, he didn't have anything in Mountain.
Okay, that
Wow,
makes
I did
sense.
not see that.
Board evaluation.
Now, Neuro does have. Nico's going to have to get rid of two of these cards. Um, Interesting
Imagine
to
he.
see Nico looking to get rid of the Oaken over the Lyra Thespian. Uh, the Lyra Thespian, most likely, I, it'll be a hard time to get the Lyra Thespian active because we don't have multiple ways to boost
Yeah, he'd have to run
currently.
into a nurture somewhere, I think.
And
But
there are uniques that boost as well, but just Oaken would be the safer play. Yep. Because Oaken, even if we only have Kodama on board, is a 3/2/2 as opposed to Lyra Thespian being a 2/2/2. And seems
that
like
Isata that Isatak's probably not going to help stop the advance the expedition this time around.
I mentioned it earlier too. I said Neuro has a one of Hisatalk, and I really want to see it. But
Straight to mana.
unfortunately, we saw it immediately go into mana.
Nah, he's gonna play that Baba just to see what he can draw here, use that extra mana. He does have a nice quote-unquote interactable, not quite a removal with that Sandman,
Mm-hmm.
to just take anything that gets boosted up too far. So we'll likely see that Gatekeeper into the Sandman, I'd have to imagine.
Yeah.
Or he's gonna play the Sandman first. Yep, Sandman first.
And just want to say our Nevenka is live in
Oh, in the top cut?
in top 4.
Nice. I don't remember who they ended up playing.
They were playing the other Tasia.
Okay. So we may see Tasia go on a full rip here, depending. It's looking not too good for him here. Taking a look at the discards. But yeah, it looks like they're completely played out here, and they're down in the stats for the tiebreaker arena. And it looks like we'll see a second Tasia go down here with Neuro coming back from that initial 1-0 loss.
So that is both of our Tasias out. Let me pull up the bracket. That is our two Tasias out. Still 2 in top 8. Excited to see that. We have Sigismar, Aonis, and Nevenka represented so far. We're still waiting on our 4th quarterfinal match between. Oh, and that just ended as well. So we will have looks like a Sigismar mirror between 2K Neuro and ExAlts Spiritus. And Aonis and Nevenka. I would assume we will be watching the Aonis versus Nevenka match because we haven't seen either of them played yet so far, but I don't have that confirmed.
You mean over the mirror Sigismar? Come on.
There's not enough Sigismar. We have to. So we will have one Sigismar in finals.
Guaranteed.
Yes.
No matter what.
We don't know who will be piloting it, but we know that it will be there. And I'm very curious to see what, like, I don't know what the matchup. Oh, looks like we're checking out the final bit. I spoiled this because I didn't know we were going to be watching it. So is currently 1-1 in
Yeah.
in this matchup, Spiritus versus Silver J. It looks like that exotic or the unique foundry mechanic has the council on it, stopping from hand, from reserve, and from anywhere abilities, and a casual 3 havens show
Nice.
face up for Silver J.
Yeah, we do see 7 cards at hand for the Sigismar, so not entirely surprising that they may end up going on to take this one. I'm assuming, I doubt we'll see the 2-0 here. Yeah, we see a charge. Interesting, the charge setup. Do you have a breakdown on like charge usage for the Sigismars? Because I noticed Neuro was using just one.
I have a breakdown for every Sigismar card. Let me just check out, because this is what I spent my day doing. So
No, I could
charge
count on you.
much less represented this tournament. 11 out of 16 of the Sigismars had 1 charge.
Okay.
Pretty much every one in previous had at least 1 charge, and then we have 7 with 2 and only 4 with 3.
Okay.
So, you know, in a lot of other, in past celebration seasons, we would basically see 3 teamwork training, 3 sticky note seals, and 1 or 2 charges.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much guaranteed across every Ortis deck. Teamwork training still incredibly highly represented. Only 1 person not running the 3 of, and they're still running 2. Sticky note seals dropping in usage, mainly that 3rd sticky note seals, and charge losing major ground on its 2nd and even ground on its 1st use of in the deck slot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember, especially in the start of the meta, charge was a big a big use, right? Like everyone's like, oh, so many stats for 2 cost and everything, and it's funny how people have valued just in general the idea of more characters in the common slots opposed to like spells and permanents kind of thing overall. We do see that 3rd Haven get hit by the spy, unfortunately, for silver. Luckily, they were able to get another card into the reserve, as Trace does, but a big blow to resources, especially not getting that resupply from the 3rd Haven.
Ooh.
And another spy. So he
Yeah.
won't have another way to get anything into reserve, and it kind of makes sense to see how we see it going down here.
Yeah, Silver J typing GG in the chat. Still bringing it to game 3, representing Traced. We didn't see this entire match, but still looks like a pretty good matchup overall. And I did just get confirmation we will be watching Aonis and Nevenka. Sorry, everyone, really hoping for the Sigismar mirror. I know you're out there, but you're gonna have to deal with Aonis and Nevenka. I'm actually incredibly excited to see what Nevenka does.
Yeah, just looking at the bracket, interesting that as far as like a semifinals, we do see the Nevenka in there. I think it's fun to see the Nevenka see a rise over the Finn. I think Nevenka can do a lot of the things that Finn can do. as far as what's available to Lyra in general, but can utilize the. I mean, realistically, uh, the hero ability of Nevenka is quite good. There's obviously the downside. You can mitigate that downside with a few different cards. I don't believe uh, this deck is running the permanent. I think it's just too much tempo loss. I'm not sure if that's the case, but it seems like that is the way to go for most Nevenka decks. Um, and yeah, people give dice rolls a bad shake, but if you think percentage wise, if you hit what you need to hit when you need to hit it, it is quite good. Like it could be better than Basira, it can be better than a lot of things that people would say is a little bit more consistent, quote unquote, right? So should be fun.
Yeah, Nevenka's interesting because she is one of the starter heroes, and the starter heroes have pretty basic abilities overall. We see uh you know most of the time their ability transfers to 1/1/1 in stats. Sigismar's the easiest to see, a 1/1/1 Oris recruit every single turn. Uh Kojo is 2/2/2 every other turn, averaging out to 1/1/1. Tasia also 1/1/1. Nevenka, but all those are front loaded. Nevenka, you get to choose who you target and when you target. But it comes at the cost of the randomness of the die roll. You can get the anchored, which, I've had matches against Nevenkas where the high roll of anchored actually hurts them because the boost would win them the expedition. And then, of course, there's the low roll of sending your character to reserve. There's, but most of the time it's going to be that 1/1/1. That is a 2 out of 3 chance for it to just be that boost. But you control where it is, like Basira. But Basira has a requirement to activate.
Right. Yeah, and Sullet mentioned that Nevenka has some pretty good uniques, and just looking at it, definitely can see how that would be the case between the two unique Mage Dancers and the Tanuki, all of them having the ability to return a spell and or card from your reserve to your hand, and that's always a good situation, whether that be in Ysmir or Lyra. So a lot of card return as far as resources to keep on reusing for the Nevenka in general between those uniques, the Inkcaster, the Hathor. That's it, but all those are a good amount of the deck. I think between 3, 6, 9 card returns of the total deck. So
Yeah.
pretty nuts.
I going like I do think it's interesting that every Lyra hero has an aspect of randomness to them. Then you don't get to control what you put into mana. So, you know, Lyra Festival was a people were very excited about that card. It's a fun card. I enjoy that card. Um but you could end up manaing all 3 of your festivals and lose your win condition without any say. Uh,
Mm.
Orak and Kibble, you don't control. You get to control when you activate your ability, but there's no tutors in the game, so you don't get to choose what's on top of your deck. So
Right.
you're always hoping that you hit Kaibara, but you could hit a Martingale. And then Nevenka with the die roll. I we saw because of this, as you said earlier, people have an aversion to um, randomness in card games a lot of times, even though there's an inherent aspect of randomness just through shuffling your deck. Um, so they avoid characters like that overall, which is I think why we saw a lot of Fen play, because Fen is the quote unquote least random of them. Um, although not choosing what you mana is can be pretty devastating, but it did seem to be the most consistent out of the three Lyra heroes. Uh,
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like pe- there's a potential that people are just figuring out that they had that initial aversion to Nevenka because of the dice roll, and then after seeing the potential with the uniques with dice rolls and having that control with being able to say like what I'm manaing kind of thing, we
yeah,
may be seeing a change to that of like Nevenka being the quote unquote more consistent uh, Lyra hero, because honestly, I haven't seen post Waru meta a lot of Finn being one used and two being taken to a higher level as far as like top rankings or top cut even.
yeah. We only had one Fen in this tournament, and one Fen, one Nevenka, and the Nevenka made it to top eight. I think in the last celebration there was um uh there was 7 Fens, so that's quite a drop off in Fen from 7 to 1. So people, I guess, just feeling uh not feeling the love for Fen right now, or also, you know, maybe all the Fen players were getting together and throwing a party that a holiday gift exchange weren't able to make it today. That could happen. We don't know that
uh,
that didn't happen.
we don't know that didn't happen. But if I were to do a dice roll to make a guess on the situation, I would assume that's probably not the case. But either way, interesting to see the Nevenka take it over the Tasia. I'm curious as far as like removal that would be able to help with that. It looks like in their deck list they are running Twinkle Twinkle, which is nice to sleep anchored characters.
Mm-hmm.
Cloth Cocoon for when they anchored the characters, and even the acapella training to set up the anchored characters to not even give them a chance to go to the reserve, I guess, is quite nice to do. Not running any out of faction off you goes, um, that would also be helpful, but obviously there's only so much you can put in the deck, so not too surprised to not see them. Um, but
We do see
still
a
interesting.
one of Hooked, which is an uh interesting inclusion. Hooked in a lot of trace decks in the last celebration. There were a lot of them were running a one cheeky Hooked, and we're also seeing who is our Nevenka player again, Helfer, uh, opting to use 2 of their rare slots for Small Step Giant Leap. Step Giant Leap, incredible card, gets you that win at the very end. It's useless until it wins you the game. We see most Izmir heroes running it, but it's a common for them.
Right.
Helfer saying, "I think this is worth the rare slot," and it seems to be playing a pretty strong value, sort of tempo mid range style, which is trying to get early advancements and then just finish the game with Small Step Giant Leap.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with the decision to, if you have the ability to run it in your deck, you're gonna want to use it. There's just so many situations. Obviously, you can brick into it kind of thing, and it doesn't help you, but I think it's more often than not, it's gonna be helpful to you, and you can just hold it, especially if you know you're gonna be ahead tempo-wise. I think Nevenka, if you're playing correctly and you get the rolls that you need in general, you can out tempo a lot of heroes and get that early lead to the point of getting at least adjacent. If even if you use all your resources to get there, and then if you have that one of small step in your hand, then the game's over. And then kind of going into a little bit more of what you were talking about as far as the hooked is concerned, that's another card that just for one cost can realistically win you at least one expedition when you need it, right? There's a reason why the Trace run it, I think, or realistically any Axiom hero potentially could run it, is that there's not much counter to it. There's no limit on the cost of the character that you can play it on. Granted, you could have some type of tough on the character to make it a little bit more difficult, but realistically, we're not seeing much tough other than in the Muna decks. So obviously some downsides with these cards being in the rare slots and only having the common abilities, but needless to say, been working for him, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I am looking at our Aonis list. So this is not one of the 3 Spindle Harvester lists. Is running 1 Spindle Harvester and a Studious Disciple and Flamel, both which are able to return spells from reserve to hand. So again, a common theme we see in Aonis and then also in our Nevenka. Is running 2 Conjuring Seals, which, I believe we talked about last celebration, starting to see more and more people running Conjuring Seals. And is on common, or not common, rare out of faction Spindle Harvesters, and no Blade Dancers. We've seen a pretty sharp decrease in Blade Dancers. I feel like in the beginning of the meta, that was the card everyone wanted to use with Aonis, but people just finding more value out of anchored characters than seasoned, it seems.
Yeah, the main difference I think that we're also seeing is the use of the common Mage Dancer in this deck list, opposed to the rare.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like they're relying more on the draw from the Baba Yagas and the realistically, I think that's their only character draw engine, because the rest of it are just through the magical training and the conjuring seals.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it just looks like they're valuing the ability for the draw from the Baba Yagas and using the rare slots and other spots for like the magical training, especially since they don't have the quote unquote um, more consistent card return with a bunch of spindle harvesters kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All their uniques do it, but not in the same way as those really good ones that we've seen before. They have to wait for the cards to leave to the reserve or at dusk or anything like that for it to happen, and nothing that's super active. So maybe that's why we see a focus on more value in the rare magical trainings, just to potentially play from reserve for 2 costs, and not focusing on the rare mage dancers, if you will.
Yeah, I do think, uh, and I agree with the common Mage Dancer. I think it's the same sort of thing with Bravo's Blade Dancer, where with those 2 cards, it feels like you're funneling all of your um, boosts onto one character in order to gain value, um, and then you're just so weak to removal. Sure, Spindle Harvester and our anchored characters, Spindle Harvester and Sneezer's Room, are still weak to removal, but I feel like you don't need to put all of your boosts on an anchored character in the same way that you need to for a seasoned character. The main benefit is not that they're the amount of boost they have last turn is sticking over to this turn. It's that you start with a body, and so you have the ability to boost when you play your spells. Obviously, when you can, you want to get as many boosts on your anchored characters as possible, but it doesn't seem like you have to as much focus on those characters as you do with the rare category mage dancer or seasoned characters.
Right. Yeah, honestly, I think it's super dependent on what uniques you're running. Um, if I have the right uniques, I feel like I would like to use the rare mage dancers over the rare magical trainings because I never plan on playing those magical trainings from reserve anyway,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and I can afford to make those commons opposed to the rares. But if I don't have the uniques, which I think is going to be the case for a lot of people that haven't been hunting them since the beginning, or don't want to go full wallet mode
Yep.
and pay for them kind of thing, um, that it definitely, and from what we can see with Brian being able to make it to the semifinals here, is not a requirement. Just find some of those uniques that do some card return that are at a good cost, and play some common mage dancers, some rare magical trainings in case you can't return them, and just keep on boosting as necessary where you're talking about and draw in other places.
I have to admit, I am. Whenever I see, I'm so glad magical training is finding its way into decks. When we were first playing in the meta, I wasn't sure how often magical training would make it into decks, and especially rare magical training, just because I love the artwork, the alternate artwork from the season pass, the
Hmm.
adventure pass, for playing at your local game store. And I picked Izmir, and I was looking for any excuse to play that artwork. Obviously, I don't
Yeah,
have it yet, but when it does come out, I'm excited to play with that artwork. It just looks so beautiful.
yeah. When I was picking as well, it was probably my favorite artwork as well, and that's why I chose it in as well for my adventure pass, at least for the initial one. And yeah, it's cool to see it being played. I wasn't a big Ysmir player in general at the time, but I just enjoyed the artwork the same as you, so makes
Yeah,
sense. Um, and good to see overall. I think of the drawing spells, I was pretty sure that it was going to be around, I did not expect, I'll be honest, I did not expect Conjuring Seal to have a place in the meta initially. I felt like that was just way too much cost for that draw in general, and it not to include a body. But obviously, it's seeing value, and not just in the Acacia category decks, where
yeah.
you can just play it and don't have to worry about anyone advancing kind of thing, and just set yourself up. So
I
fun
did.
to see.
I did have someone uh, trying to explain that to me, saying, "Well, magical training if you're using rare magical training, that's 3 mana to draw 2 cards,
Hmm.
whereas uh, that's the same as base conjuring seal is 3 mana to draw 2 cards." Now, I do think that that overlooks a good amount of aspects to Altered. The fact that
Yeah,
magical training uh, also works as an after you for like Acacia deck, so you can see where you want to put cards, and then for a
yeah.
Faunus, it works as 2 boosts. But it was an interesting point uh, that was brought up as to why we're starting to see more Conjuring Seal.
Yeah, from a base level, if you're talking complete numbers situation, I get it. But like you said, there's a lot of different aspects to the game. One of the main portions of Altered, in the sense that you don't have a soft pass other than as an in-game mechanic kind of thing, um, is that having those low cost cards to play is a huge deal, to always be the last person that's making a play for any particular day, right? So I think it overlooks it a little bit. I understand the concept behind it. You get immediate value opposed to later value. I don't know that many people that are wanting to play the Conjuring Seal from reserve for the 5 cost,
Yeah.
um, unless you potentially have a rare one. But uh, with the card return abilities and specifically spell returns, you wouldn't have to worry about it. But most times you're not seeing the Conjuring Seal being returned, you're seeing those 1-cost spells being returned. So yeah, I think it's just another help as far as card draw is always good and it's found its place, which is nice to see. But yeah, we're getting into the next game, it looks like, here with mana getting set up on the initial draw.
And we do see, um, excuse me, the or both of Helfer's Ouroboros croupiers going into mana immediately. That will be only they're, if I remember correctly, they're only running those two, so we
Yep.
will not be seeing any croupiers played this game.
Yeah, it looks like they're valuing the 2-card play with the one with being played first here, just so that way they can guarantee they're not getting 2-0'd. I think I would have liked to keep the acapella training in their opening hand, especially to potentially just give like that mage dancer fleeting, right?
Yeah,
But not the worst situation. Um, I think he was probably looking to get the boost there on that
yeah,
roll opposed to the anchored, because he's probably looking to return the Martingale. Uh, but at least he'll have some stats out on the board. There's worse situations than having anchored available to you. So
and this is one of those instances where you're like, oh, the high roll of anchored is a bit of a low roll, especially with the martingale. The best option would have been a 5, so we get to choose whether we want the anchored or the boost. but
right.
um but still starts off with 2/2/2. Does not bounce the martingale back to hand, but starts the board off with some pressure, uh even though Brian was able to get a advancement during the last round.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what what the next play is going to be. I'm thinking that we might see a Tanuki being played here, so that way when um, the Inkcaster and the Tanuki go to reserve, he can just return the Tanuki potentially for another sabotage.
Yep.
Um,
That also works
but
well with the martingale and the Tanuki um math, because that'll be all for mana, and the Tanuki battles well in the companion expedition for Helfer.
yeah, so I'll be curious to see if that or if they're going to prio trying to keep the Martingale in general. But yeah, it looks like that's probably the play we're going to see, and then that'll allow them to get a risk-free dice roll if they have the Martingale out. Impossible to hit the 1. Well, you can hit the 1, but you can always make it a 2 either way.
Yeah.
So likely what we'll see here, Spindle Harvester to the right. It's not going to stop anything at this point. There's a decision of, do they want to save the Martingale for later and just be able to take the 2-1 here? But nope, they're going to go for it, see if they can get a good dice roll and potentially anchor the Martingale, I'd imagine.
And I think this makes sense based off the fact that they kept the small step giant leap.
Hmm.
It seems like they're looking to just try to get early advancements and then play for that small step giant leap, as opposed to maybe drawing out the game a bit more.
Yeah, and they get the boost to counter and put themselves 1 up on the expedition, and I'm sure we'll see the immediate return of the Tanuki, and they will be the first player moving forward here to get a sabotage, I assume, on the Mage Dancer. We see the second small step get drawn. go into an immediate mana, and we'll probably see that first one stay in the hand of the Nevenka until late in the game, unless they get behind considerably and they need other cards to play, I think. But
Yeah.
probably looking at it staying in hand as long as they're ahead enough.
I think, you know, uh, you mentioned earlier Tanuki sabotaging the Katagiran Mage Dancer, and I think it's always, not always, but probably 99% of the time, the correct answer to just hit the Aonis' characters. Because of the way Aonis has to deck build, you have to have kind of about 50-50 in terms of characters to spells, although it's more like 45-55. And the characters just don't feel as powerful if you don't have the spells behind them. So just constantly try to make sure that they're playing on the back foot by getting rid of their characters. Either they draw badly into it and they don't have any characters to boost, or if they have more characters than spells, then their characters aren't going to be that valuable anyways.
Yeah, we do see the unique coming out, the Flamel unique coming out from the Aonis. Basically, we'll need to see the helping hand being played here if they want to potentially 2-0 here. But that would also mean they can't return the helping hand to hand with the Aonis effect if they play it here. So be curious to see if they decide to take the risk to go up on the board opposed to valuing resources in this next play.
And it also, this is one of the instances where the delay of Nevenka's ability helps, because Brian has to play around either of those characters getting boosts. So if now that Brian has seen, or now that Helfer has seen who who is getting which boost, can target the Tanuki in order to stop Brian from advancing in that lane. Isn't able to win, but is still able to keep it from a double advancement.
Yeah, and I think it was the correct play by Brian on the Aonis to double boost on the companion side on the Spindle, because it basically guaranteed a win on that side and didn't give Helfer on the Nevenka the opportunity to target the Inkcaster and potentially anchor it if it doesn't hit the boost kind of thing, especially with it being fleeting and not being able to use it into the next day. So good idea of like resource allocation available to the Nevenka and making sure that they didn't have too much extra on Brian's side.
Important to note that Flamel's support ability is the next spell you play this turn loses fleeting. So it is not cost reduction like base Flamel. And so will not allow us to make Conjuring Seal cost 2 instead of 3.
Okay, so it has the rare Lady of the Lake ability.
Yep.
We will see the unique Tanuki come out from Nevenka. Gets the Sabotage, and we'll also have the roll dice, return cards effect.
And that's, and I feel like we haven't seen while magical training is played a lot in Izmir decks, it isn't necessarily played as much in it's played, but not as consistently in Lyra. One, because if you're playing it in Fen and you flip it over from resupply, ooh,
that's rough.
That is rough, especially because since it goes to reserve, it doesn't see the dice roll and return the magical training.
Yeah, so he'll be able to return the Tanuki here, I think, opposed to the magical training. Yeah. but not the ideal play. It's one of the situations where you don't hit the roll that you need. 1 in 6 chance. Statistically, you should have had a good opportunity to have a good play, but unfortunately, you hit the worst statistical possibility,
Yeah.
and you don't. But still even board state, fairly even resource setup here. Um, Going into the next day, well, we will see the Tanuki immediately being played. Um, Curious to see who they're going to hit. They're going to hit the Disciple. Not as big of a threat, especially not knowing that there's 2 Mage Dancers in hand. Um, but had to hit something and probably didn't want to hit the 5 cost Conjuring Seal. So we'll see.
Oh,
Immediate, uh,
nice. So
immediate
return.
dice roll. Yeah.
So able to return the Ouroboros Incaster. So would after playing the Hathor as well, we'll be sending 3 cards to reserve if the Tanuki got the boost instead of the Anchor. But the
Hmm.
Ouroboros Incaster would then pop either Tanuki or Hathor back. So it was so even though 3 cards would be going to reserve, only 2 cards would be staying there. One would be returning to hand. So good value out of your cards and keeping card advantage. That
Yeah,
was
we will see the Beauty Sleep immediately sleep that anchored Tanuki the same way you would sleep any Muna character. Um, but with the Hathor out, still some big stats available to the Nevenka. Um, but the Afonist can play the Beauty Sleep again potentially for more boosts. Or I guess they could bring out the second Mage Dancer, but then that would be a lot of cards going to reserve. So I assume we're probably going to see the Beauty Sleep being played here, but we'll take a look.
also important to note that currently Brian is double advancing.
Okay, so he is going to just save the Beauty Sleep here, take the double advance, and just let the Nevenka take the single advance.
And you do not want a Faunus to be right next to each other in expeditions. There is no small step giant leap in hand currently, but
Yeah. Ooh, doesn't hit it.
I was gonna say every time I see Banishing Gate, I think for a second, oh, is that small step giant leap? Uh,
But
and Brian is running 2 small step giant leaps, and I
yeah,
don't think we've
curious
seen
enough.
any maned.
Curious enough, though, we do see the small step giant leap in the Nevenka's hand. So if they can prevent a any advance this turn and get one themselves, they will be first player and have the first opportunity, the small step in general. So
Yeah.
big day here to decide the first game of the match.
Now Brian does have access to 2 Mage Dancers as well as the ability to play 2 Beauty Sleeps, so should be able to get some good value. Just goes all in on one.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like there'll be any removal available to the Nevenka, probably putting them in a bad spot here. I think this is one of the scenarios where the anchored and sleep of the Tanuki it was going to hurt them more than help them here, especially not being able to return it to hand and sabotage.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see one more Beauty Sleep available here. Probably going to go on the Cernanos, and that'll be a GG.
It could go on the Tanuki, at any point, just because uh, even with the Cernunos up, the Mage Dancer plus a Faunus boost is going to win
Yeah,
that lane. Um, so that didn't need to be Beauty Sleep there. It just needed to be any spell.
yeah. But we'll
And
see it.
that's game one.
Yep. Close one. Realistically, we were just one more advance away for the Nevenka from taking it with that small step that they did have in hand for a good majority of the game. I think
I think
that's
they drew
always
in
the
turn
one.
two.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the downsides of small step, right? It just feels like a huge weight in your hand the entire time because you can't mana it if you know you've already managed one of them, and you just at a certain point because the Nevenka was up almost the entire game, and then it got a little bit too late to mana it and just hope that they could get adjacent, right?
Yep.
So as much of it as it is a good card, it can also be a little bit of a downside, but that just shows good balance in the card game. So
Yeah.
congrats, Equinox.
It's useless until it wins you the game, which is, and there's been I think the cards people are talking about most right now, I feel, are Small Step, Giant Leap, and Haven Bravos Bastion as overpowered cards.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that Small Step, Giant Leap at 6 mana, and it basically, again, you don't use it until you're almost touching, and then you use it. So it's a brick in your hand until that moment. Whereas, Haven Bravos Bastion is just always good whenever you get it, basically.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever seen an early use of the small step is when they already had two of them, basically, and they knew a 2-0 wouldn't have them lose the game, and they just needed two more advances anyway.
Yeah.
So they were able to play both in succession for 2 consecutive days. Um, but yeah, like you said, for the most part, you're waiting until the last possible day, and then you're playing it. So it could be a downside. You either need the perfect time to draw it, or you're not drawing it too early. Hopefully, you don't draw two of them in your opening hand, because you want to keep one of them, right? But it doesn't feel good having that from the beginning of the game, moving forward. But either way, close game for the Nevenka. It is a best of three. We did see in our last match a person who went down initially able to take the next two games, so we might see it here. Either way, good match. Would be cool to see the Nevenka in the finals, but I won't complain seeing another Sigismar Afanis matchup in the finals for Celebration again.
Now, I am curious. Um, in the new tournament rules that they posted, in best of threes, the initial first player is supposed to be random. And then after that, the loser of the game gets to choose who goes first. But
Correct.
we're not able to do that on BGA. Are we?
Yeah, it's just it is just randomized, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Um,
Unfortunate.
because that is an interesting aspect. I don't have the stats to back this up, but it doesn't seem that there's as much of a win disparity based on first or second player because of the way that days work in Altered, and that you're going back and forth. Obviously, there are certain rounds where you'll be stronger. If you are playing Sigismar on the first turn and you're going second, you're more likely to double advance. But overall, um, it isn't as big of a issue as it is in other card games. And the Kellen guy just saying in chat that it does seem you can use the rematch button and it will reverse starting player or order or something. So I'm not
Interesting.
sure if we're using that, but interesting.
Yeah, as far as like the first player, second player initial setup, again, like you said, I don't have the specific statistics on it. I would imagine most of the time you are gonna want to go second. I think there's a few scenarios where you wouldn't. And honestly, the determination of going first or second is a big it matters for like your opening hand, right? Like there'd be
Mm-hmm.
scenarios where you would pick different cards based on if you're going first or second. I think we saw that in the previous game with the Nevenka, deciding with them going first, deciding to play 2-1 on their characters, right? But yeah, if we actually had a stat breakdown, and maybe this is something that I've spoken to Tom with about, that maybe they have available to them at some point to go with their 39cards.com kind of thing. But I think that second player is more than likely going to have a slight advantage as far as winning the specific game. I wouldn't go too far with it. Let's just say 55-45 for the time being, but uh, not sure. Like you said, it's a little bit more balanced than a lot of card games, I think, especially with having the ability to decide what's in your opening hand with the mana.
Yeah.
um, as we do see a 1/1. And it can have fun situations. Like I was playing a game earlier today where we were both playing a Kojo deck, and we both advanced 2-2 on the first day. So we both had a double advance. So
Nice.
that was interesting to say the least.
I'm interested to see what Brian does with mana. Just because we've seen uh Aonis's really hold on to their first small step giant leap, and it does seem like Brian will be going for that. Uh
Somehow Aaron got a bot in his broadcast channel. That's funny. Anyway, um, yeah, he decides not to mana the small step. I think we discussed this before, as far as like the decision of manning small step is based off of like matchup kind of thing. We kind of see the inverse of what we saw previously, where day two the Nevenka had the small step and they held on to it the entire game, where we may see the Aonis do the exact same thing here in game two. So um, either way, we do see the unique mage dance, one of the unique mage dancers for the Nevenka coming out.
and I believe that Mage Dancer says you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, target character gains one boost, and then when you roll one or more dice, you may return a card from your reserve to your hand. So that's any card. That's why we're able to see the Martingale be returned, whereas the other Mage Dancer is you may return any spell.
Good dice rolls for the Nevenka this time around. Looks like we're going to go to another 1/1 and be all even on the tumult.
Now, if we continue to go 1-1 with both decks having small step giant leap, it will be interesting to see who has first priority when we go to uh, the small step giant leap turn. If they are still going 1-1.
Yeah, I think it'll be a situation where if in the scenario, obviously, of the Faunus, they're going to play to go even the entire game as much as possible because they know they have the small step. Whereas the Nevenka more than likely is going not, once they get down to it later in the game on the tumult, probably not going to want to be in that scenario, if at all possible. But it is not always the best case of like trying to stop that scenario from happening. So we'll see if that's what it comes down to at the very end. But yeah, one of those cases where first turn, second turn does matter, I guess, in comparison to what we were talking about before.
All right, so the acapella training was not played. It was put into reserve by the Mage Dancers of effect. That is why Mage Dancer already has one boost. Although, unfortunately for Helfer, uh, that strong mountain stat going to waste here currently.
We do see the unique Spindle Harvester come out as well. Immediate roll for Helfer to start returning some cards. We'll keep on going to the hero side with the Martingale that just got returned. No more rolling happening here, but they will be able to play the Inkcaster to return the Martingale again, most likely, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
The sleep hit in the unique Spindle Harvester, so that way they can keep utilizing their return effects on the spells, and have 2 cards out for next turn for both Spindle Harvesters and the hero side of things. We will see that acapella training come out on the Sneezer Shroom to have 1 less character available for the Aonis.
And
And
I do
potential,
think
yeah,
that's the best option. Again, getting rid of um just getting rid of characters, even though Brian will have 2 spindle harvesters on board at start of turn. Um just reducing the resources of the Aonis. And why did we saw the helping hand go back from reserve for Brian.
yeah, probably just to remove it off of the Spindle Harvesters, or potentially save it for the unique Spindle Harvester just in case it gets acapella training, not knowing what's in hand. But feels comfortable enough to play it now, remove it from the other Spindle Harvester. We'll have 2 mana available if he needs to use it again. Boost up the Katagirin to 4/4/4. Yeah, 4/4/4. But we will see the Cernanos come out, give some more stats. If he plays the helping hand again, he can catch up there to get to block. Question is does he value the resource to potentially return again? Because I think he wants to hold on to it for when he plays the unique next turn. But we will see. Either way, he's gonna have 2 more cards going to reserve, so he would probably, if he doesn't play the helping hand here, keep it and the unique, but decides to play it anyway, and likely going to get rid of one of the Spindle Harvesters, I imagine, the rare one, when it goes to reserve.
Yeah, especially since as we see that helping hand, while it did for the moment match and tie Helfer's companion expedition, the Nevenka boost is still gonna let Helfer advance. So
Yep.
the helping hand didn't really it. I guess if Helfer hit anchored in that moment,
Yeah.
it would have mattered. But it's not like he could hit the 1 because of the Martingale.
Yeah. It basically forced Helfer to target something on the companion side, opposed to trying to target the Martingale and anchor it for next turn, just to have 1 less resource out there. So potentially the right play there for Brian. 1 less decision to make, being able to keep both Spindle Harvesters once dusk hits and have the Beauty Sleep return to hand. Will immediately resource the second small step. Not going to be able to utilize both.
Interesting to see Helfer ink or put into mana, sorry, the cloth cocoon. I guess valuing the tempo, being able to play all 3 cards, the Cernunos, the Ouroboros Trickster, and the Ouroboros Inkcaster.
Yeah.
Over the removal of that unique Spindle Harvester.
Yeah. You got it into Lorcana mode there for a second, but we'll forgive you. But yeah, I agree. It seems like he's just going for more stats, as much stats as possible, potentially realizing that they have less resources and just want to hope that they run into a small step as well, or try to get a double advance here. But he does not know. Well, he does know the beauty sleep was there, so interesting to see that in general. So that will leave a 1-1 again, potentially coming down to a crucial second to last day here. Ooh, huge anchored for the Nevenka, so they're going to have a really good chance here in this next day to prevent an advance from the Aonis, especially with both heroes having characters on the board. Really needed that. So big turn, small step in hand for the Aonis. They will be first player going into not this day, but the following day. So little does Helfer know, but they really need to stop any advancing here for the Aonis.
And a weird hand for Helfer. Ouroboros, Trickster in reserve, and then Martingale and Hooked.
A lot of resources available to the Aonis as well. Off You Go is going to be huge. Beauty Sleep's going to be huge. One cost magical training as an after you is going to be huge. Not looking too good for Helfer in this situation, especially since it's pretty much, if Brian wants to, is going to be able to advance on any side, assuming that they play correctly, I believe. So
Yeah.
we'll see
It,
how it turns out, but we may be looking at a small step game here.
there's a potential that, uh, depending on how this Hooked goes, Hooked does not have fleeting, so we'll be able to use it twice. But, alright. I was going to say, depending on how the Hook's used, would have to move everything to one. Helfer would have to move all of Brian's characters to one uh, expedition just to better combat, uh, losing this turn. But there's a
Yeah, and he's
chance that, ooh, and
yeah
that's
that's gonna pretty
oh,
much guarantee it.
we have the Martingale, so it's the boost still. Yeah, I was like that, but even still,
Yeah,
uh,
he can two cost play the magical training and then play the Off You Go.
and target the Ouroboros Trickster, so doesn't even need small step giant leap.
Yeah. Either way, had it guaranteed. GG's to the Nevenka though in Helfer, making it all the way to the semifinals. We will see a repeat of the previous celebration, Aonis versus Sigismar. Wait, no, it was Aonis versus Aonis mirror match, right? So never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about. Aonis versus Sigismar, season 3 celebration should be a good one.
And let me check and see if we have our other game reported yet.
Let's
It is. It is.
maybe hold on just in case we
Oh,
might see it here played.
uh, so I will hold on just in
If
case,
Aaron
but
decides to play it, but we may have it. We'll see.
I'm gonna just start preparing the bracket. But we do know that the other match is going to be a Sigismar. We all right. We are watching the end of the next game, so thank
Sweet.
you for stopping me.
So we got Spiritus with the Grand Endeavor out already. So it seems like we had some slow play in general. So this puts Neuro on a timer. I'm assuming this is 1-1 at this point, as far as game totals.
Um,
or just a
Yes.
really
Yeah.
yeah,
This
or
is this is 1-1.
okay, so yep, game 3 here. Grand Endeavor out for Spiritus. Both players have uniques out. Um, so big turn here in general.
Oh, forgot to switch back to the game. I had uh the bracket still up.
Yeah, no worries.
Yes. Uh but that Grand Endeavor is going to be, it's putting Neuro on a clock. Uh
Yep.
even if they trade 1-for-1, the Grand Endeavor is going to let Spiritus eventually win.
Yeah, and also in general, they are up on the tumult as well, so they're
Yeah.
happy to go 1-for-1 here in this scenario. And they will in fact do that, and at noon will be adjacent and be ready to either win during the upcoming day or
So
well,
unless Neuro is able to remove the Grand Endeavor,
yeah, it will be game over
it will be
because
game over. Because even if Neuro plays a Grand Endeavor of his own, and somehow nobody advances this turn, or and still double advances, Spiritus will have priority for their Grand Endeavor to go off first.
yeah, so uh big turn for a sticky no seal.
Yep.
We will
We
not be
we
able to see in hand, so
I was gonna say we
we don't
don't have
know.
hands this time. So you know, I feel so much
Yep,
dumber. Oh, yep,
forfeit.
there we go. I was gonna say, when I have all of the information, everything is so much easier, as opposed to all the hidden information. So that will be Spiritus moving forward. We'll have Spiritus versus. Oh, we have an all ExAlts final. ExAlts Spiritus versus ExAlts Brian.
It's rigged. Rigged.
Rigged. Report it.
ExAlts obviously bringing their folks into the finals. It's okay. We got to give them this one. That's fine. But yeah, interesting. Be a fun matchup here. Can pull up. I don't have Spiritus's deck list up, but I can pull it. Let's see. Let's see. They are running your favorite cheeky one Grand Endeavor, so
Love it.
interesting that they were able to get that up there. Um,
And
one,
this is the sort of bureaucrat Sigismar that I was talking about.
mm,
We have 3 Oris attorneys, 2 monolith legates. You know, switching over a bit from Moru to this Sigismar. Now that Robin Hood's gone.
yeah. One of the interesting things that we haven't really gone over as well is the Kegger and Alchemist. So in the rare out of faction, from hand, it gets that 3 boost, becomes a 4/4/4 stat stick. But then from reserve is just 1 cost and is just 1/1/1. So the interesting thing to me and stuff that I've seen, like even when I'm building my own Sigismar deck, is the prio between the Kegger and Alchemist and potentially the out of faction Haven Warrior, right?
Yep.
Because essentially it is the same thing from hand, but reserve quite different, right? So it seems like there is a prioritization to just having the small body opposed to the bigger stat stick from reserve with the warrior and just focusing on like the surprise element of having a 4/4/4 stat stick from hand. No way you can know it's coming, whereas if it's in reserve you know it's coming and it's a bigger target for sabotage, whereas no one really wants to sabotage an
Yeah.
alchemist from in reserve. So it seems like that might be the thought process overall. It is kind of a little bit of an after you in Ortis, but it's a fun thing to take a look at because from hand they're essentially the same card, from reserve entirely different, and they're both out of faction rares that you would have to choose from in your Sigismar decks.
I was actually talking to Simon about this, um, of AWOL fame, uh, at PAX Unplugged last weekend. Because for the first tournament, I was running Sigismar and had Haven Warriors in my deck.
Hmm.
And he brought up that same point. I said I feel like I prefer Haven Warrior because I have so many 1-drops already that I'm worried I'm going to only have 1-drops and won't have any bigger bodies. But as you said, that does make it more of a target for removal as opposed to Category and Alchemist. Um, in this, is in Sigismar's this celebration, Category and Alchemist was more represented than Haven Warrior. Half of the decks had one Category and Alchemist, so 8 out of 16, whereas only 5 out of 16 had a Haven Warrior, at least one Haven Warrior, and 25% or 4 of the 16 Sigismars were running 3 Category and Alchemists, although a number of those were uniques. I think we had 4 uniques, 5 unique Category and Alchemists, it looks like.
So I just had a thought actually while looking at Spiritus's deck list, on the benefit of running the Alchemists, uh, other than what I mentioned in general. It actually opens up um, more rare slots for you, essentially, because you don't have to prioritize one costs of either Ordish Trooper, Foundry Mechanic, or Frog Prince. Because
Mm,
essentially you add 3 1-cost characters when played from reserve, that you wouldn't have normally because you're playing 3 troopers or 3 foundry mechanics or 3 rare frog princes kind of thing. And with Spiritus, they're only running 3 true 1 costs in the rare slots, not including uniques.
mm-hmm.
And with having the Alchemist from reserve, they're essentially running 6, which is usually the sweet spot for 1-cost cards in your deck, especially in Sigismar. So essentially, with that, they're able to open up more rare slots that they can use elsewhere. I guess I did miss one Paper Herald in the common, but other than that, it seems like that could be a reason. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but that's a good point. Um,
Yeah, I didn't think of it either until I was just kind of like trying to think of other things while looking at the deck in its entirety, and I thought it was weird, like saying, "Oh, they only have 2 rare troopers, and they
it,
only have one frog prince," and I'm like, "Oh, I guess it could work that way," but yeah,
looking at Spiritus's deck, they also have uh 2 Kokoba rares.
yeah.
So, we there's a number of Kokobas in decks overall. Um 9 out of 16 running 1 Kokoba. But most of them are actually unique.
Hmm.
Um which well, I guess there's four four commons, 3 uniques, and 2 rares. So I guess they're mostly common, but you know, uh, there are a large number of uniques compared to other specific characters. So, and Spiritus and Skizik being the only 2 that opted to bump their Kokobas to rare. Um, and they actually have pretty similar decks.
Yeah.
I wonder if Spiritus and Skizik were working together because they seem to have, uh, just based off a quick look, probably 35 out of 39 cards are the same. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting, the whole dynamic of working out the Sigismar deck list, because obviously there's a lot of them and there's been some variation. I know you recently showed that there is a lot of similarities as well. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of a conundrum. We also see the full 3 sticky note seals on Spiritus's Sigismar, which is
and and 3 charge.
right. So quite interesting. Those usage of rares on things like the Attorney, Kakoba, uh, Alchemist, and whatnot, able to open up more common slots in general, maybe. I don't know. But I'm also looking at Spiritus's uniques, and they're nuts as far as like token generation. He has one of the double token generators on the Ortis Trooper for 2/2 cost,
Yeah.
um, and a target token generator on the Amelia Earhart with the 2/1 cost. Then, like we saw earlier, the Founder mechanic that has the Council ability on them as well when you control a token. So
And I do think with those types of uniques, Catacare Alchemist is the clear decision over Haven Warrior, because each character you play is, netting you more value because you're creating more tokens. So you'll want more lower cost cards, as opposed to the Haven Warrior making it so you have a bigger body in that Haven Warrior, but less overall bodies, uh, because of the lack of token generation. The lack of bonus token generation you get for playing more non-token characters. And with that, it also makes sense to have the 3 charge, because there's a lot, even for Ortis, which has a lot of token spam, this deck seems to have even more token spam than usual.
yeah, makes sense for the charge, makes sense for the Kakoba, because you're playing the Alchemist early, you're having it in reserve, you can play it from reserve, set yourself up with a Kakoba play as well, set yourself up for a charge play, set yourself up for a teamwork training removal, all that good stuff, that kind of lends to your strategy. Even the Paper Herald at 1 cost, being able to quick effect a token out there is beneficial, just to have another character to utilize for all of your other characters that need characters on the board. Character, token spam, win-win. Anyway,
I am curious to see how it if Ortis Attorney will be played and how effective it is. Um,
yeah,
Ortis Attorney, clear, one of the best cards in Waru, because it can draw you so many cards. I think in Sigismar, the main benefit of it is it puts your opponent in an awkward spot of giving you value no matter what they do.
yeah,
I put an Ortis Attorney out, and you're like, well, I could block that, but then you're drawing a card, or I'm giving you an expedition advancement. So it feels like a lose-lose situation. But
yeah,
obviously, it doesn't have the same synergies as it would in a Waru deck. And we're also seeing, in this deck list, one of the few players who isn't running Sandman. Um, 10 out of 16 Sigismars were running a Sandman, and and then 7 out of those 10 running a second one as well. No Sandman in Spiritus's deck.
Yeah, it's interesting with the attorney because it goes into like a previous conversation we were having between the monolith rune scribe common and the legat 2/1/2 at a common. Because the attorney has the 2/2 cost as well, but it also is just the same stat stick as the monolith rune scribe if you have the room to use those rare slots, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting because even if you don't hit that draw that you want, you're still having a solid 2 cost 2/2/2 that you can utilize for your token generation as well, opposed to just a 1 cost cards in general. So I can see the idea behind it. I don't know if I value it more than something like a Sandman that you're talking about, especially since without Sandman in your deck as a Sigmar player, you're running into some situations where you're leaning on teamwork training as your only type of interaction with your opponent's characters. But I mean, obviously working for the Sigmar player here with Spiritus. So I'll be interested to see how it plays, like you mentioned, and see how the attorneys utilize, how all the tokens are utilized, how the Khadgar and Alchemist is utilized from reserve, and maybe even the one-off Grand Endeavor and how that plays out in the game overall. Because I don't think we're going to see much use out of the sticky note seals this time around.
Yeah. I don't know. Spiritus's approach to Sigismar kind of reminds me of other card games where people just say math is for blockers. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't need as much interaction because I'm just gonna try and overwhelm you. You know, it's for you to try and deal with my board state, as opposed to the other way around.
Right. Relying on your own strategies to deal with your board state more than you are the other opponent makes sense. Obviously works better against some decks than others,
Yeah.
but we'll see how it works out in general for him. I think we're only 2 minutes or so off from the next game, so good to
Yes.
have anyone that's joining here and still listening to us talk.
The game has already started, but we are playing on a delay so that no one is able to. Or we are watching on a delay so that no one is able to cheat.
Yeah, those ExAlts players in the finals, we don't
Yeah,
want to give
we
them any
can't trust them.
opportunities.
They're bad seeds. No.
Yeah.
So, just for anyone watching, know that this is on a delay. Well, as we head into the finals, hold on, let me do something real quick. I had this prepared at some point, and then I copy and pasted something else and ruined it. But everyone, take a moment. I just put a link to Blue Oak TV's YouTube. Thank you for joining me for commentary this morning. Very early morning for you. It's 6:30 for you.
Yep, 6:30 for me right now.
So starting at 4 a.m. I think is when we were.
Yeah, got an early start.
We did the commentary for season 2 ExAlts celebration on Blue Oak's channel. We decided to do it on my channel this time. Well, I asked if we could do it on my channel this time, just so to spread the love a bit. But I want to make sure. Click that link and go subscribe to Blue Oak. Kellen Guy, much easier for me. I'm on the East Coast of the U.S., so it's 9:30 for me. Sure, it's early, but it's not early.
Yeah, you still had to get up early.
Yeah.
Doable.
The confusing part was the first ExAlts celebration happened when France had done like daylight savings time or whatever done, but we hadn't yet.
Yeah, there's always that like week or two delay.
And so it was so confusing trying to figure out the timing for it. And it really threw me off. But and it's fun. It's fun to commentate. Blue Oak does a lot of commentary for you mainly do the AWOL stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've done a lot of AWOL stuff. Jumped on to the Go for Altered folks stuff on their initial release. They had a big one, but a lot of AWOL stuff for Mondays and Wednesdays. I'll be taking over for Spooks on Wednesdays, so until he is back. But yeah, should be fun in general. Like doing this commentating stuff and getting to watch some good Altered, and then occasionally throwing my hat in there and playing some fun low tier heroes just to see if I can do well with them. But yeah, getting started here.
Yeah, we're heading into the finals. I just real quick while we're mentioning it, will the you will be streaming the AWOL tournament on your YouTube, correct?
Yeah, on Wednesday I'll be streaming it on my end, Blue Oak TV. Come check it out. If anyone does want to commentate with me, let me know, and I will gladly have you on, and we'll go from there. This includes you too, if you wanted to jump on. I don't know what your Wednesdays are like, but yeah.
Wednesdays are normally busy for me, so
Yeah.
I unfortunately I enjoy watching the AWOL tournaments, but I normally only get to catch a game or two, as opposed to staying being able to watch the entire thing.
Yeah.
We see 2 uniques in the opening hand of Spiritus.
Yeah, hard not to keep those.
Yeah. Especially since he
will be able to hit
draw a card this turn.
Yeah, he will be able to hit the Ozma trigger, based off of the unique's effect. So the unique token will generate, and then he'll get the Ozma trigger and get the draw.
And this will also be a double advance for
because
Spiritus.
Is the Foundry
it's
a target?
It's only in your companion expedition, but that's going to be the most beneficial for.
Yeah, so that'll work out.
Yeah. Now Brian will also advance once because of Forest, because of the Baba Yaga. Unfortunately, not playing Rin and Orchid, so that will not matter. But strong double advance and a card draw for both players.
Shoutouts to Rin and Orchid. Which you brought to a win on PAX U, right?
I did. Hold on, I'm gonna. I got my Icebound Taiga that I won.
Big card.
I was going to play Sigismar, and then decided last minute to switch to Rin and Orchid because it was the final day. I thought, let's just have some fun with it, and then went from bottom of top 8th seed to end up winning it. So I got but it was a lot of fun. Anyway, yeah. This is not the finals that we're talking about. The finals in front of us is what's more interesting. But I appreciate the shout out.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we do see the sabotage on that Foundry mechanic unique coming from Brian, but didn't know that second unique was coming out.
Kellen Guy, there was Dax Stormrider got the dragon token as a giant card, and we asked Justin if it was legal for tournament play, if you summon a dragon token, could he just pop out the giant card onto the thing? And Justin did say that it would be right now he thinks it would be up to tournament organizers' discretion. So here's hoping
It
it can
is
happen for Dax.
it is an official card, so
And seeing 1-for-1, Baba Yaga not being able to draw a card from reserve, although Ozma is. So Sigismar keeping that card advantage strong.
yep, getting another advance as well.
I I had mentioned this earlier, Blue, that while you were getting water and dealing with your leak,
issue. Yeah.
That Sigismar to me doesn't often feel like a synergistic deck. It feels like you're just playing really good cards, but doesn't have the same, like, when you play Aonis or Traced, you can feel the mechanics working together.
Right.
Spiritus's deck, on the other hand, I think is incredibly well synergized.
Yeah.
So I have to walk myself back a bit because while I think in general Sigismar is just like, oh, let me play all the best cards I can, and my hero ability kind of just helps me with push because it's constant value. You can make it into a well-oiled deck.
Yeah, I think a lot of the value you can get from Sigismar deck is obviously token generation and benefiting off of that with your effects that require bodies to be on the expeditions. I think honestly, if played correctly, one of the biggest things for Sigismar is just the ability to have multiple avenues to draw cards. A lot of the time, you have Ozma, which is an amazing card because it plays from hand and reserve to draw. And it's unfortunate that you don't see it a lot in like Bravos because it doesn't really make sense with the boosted setup, and it being an out of faction rare. And then you obviously see Baba Yaga. That's always good for draw. You'll see occasional draw in uniques. You'll see a lot of different things. And it's really needed a lot of the times, and it's kind of the downside to a lot of Bravos decks is because there's not much draw,
Yeah.
and you lose out on resources, whereas Sigismar is able to take advantage of having good cards and being able to replenish resources by drawing a lot of the time, even though they don't have a lot of resupply. But draw is technically better than resupply most of the time.
Yeah. Unless you're in Traced, really. That's the one instance where
Yeah.
you'd probably prefer resupply over draw. Real quick, just want to say that Studious Disciple says, when I leave the expedition zone, if I have one or more boosts, you may return a card other than me from your reserve to your hand. And so we saw it bring back the magical trading.
Yep. Speaking of some more draw too, we see that attorney come out that we've been talking about a few different times. And we'll see potentially how Spiritus decides to play it. They are up by 1 on the Tumult. So they may be potentially just trying to keep on pushing one side. They do know that there is probably some removal or interaction available to the Aonis with having a good amount of cards in hand. So they slow play with that 1 cost Alchemist that we've talked about before. But yeah, should be interesting to see how this day goes. I think we're getting to the point of where I think Brian knows they have to start making a move to not just letting Spiritus advance consistently, because they're just, after this day, they could be 1-2-0 away from losing game 1.
Yeah. And we see Spiritus going for the Baba Yaga, leaving up, and another 2-drop card. So that will leave Spiritus open to play any of the cards in his hand. The Charge doesn't really do much right now. The Ozma would draw a card. Um, and I believe Spiritus knows that the magical training is in hand, but doesn't know about the beauty sleep. So, oh, excuse me. Um,
Yeah, ideal play is the teamwork training, and it looks
yeah.
like he will do it, just to guarantee an advance here.
And
Um,
that Flamel will proc when I go to reserve from the exposition zone. You may return a spell from your reserve to hand.
so yeah, um, looks like Brian's just going to take advantage of this, get an additional card for additional resource here for the next day, and be fine with a 1/1. Not a complete dire situation, has a lot of resources available to him with the two uniques, Helping Hand and Beauty Sleep in hand, and realistically, I haven't seen any small steps either. So if uh, Brian can get a 2-0 here, they may end up taking the game while being down the entire time.
Yeah. Uh, oh, and you speak it into existence. There's small step.
Yeah, immediate click on the sticky note seal for Spiritus.
I
No
don't think
use
there's a
in
single
this matchup.
card. There is one card sticky note seals can hit. The common Flamel.
Yeah, it's and I'm not gonna use it on the common
Yeah.
Flamel unless I absolutely need to. But either way, it's not likely to stay in my hand. But like you like you said, we do see the small step. Should be interesting to see how this is played. We will see the ability for Spiritus to sabotage one of those uniques if he wants to. So I imagine that's probably going to be the first play, but
Yeah.
maybe he has something else in mind.
Most likely targeting the studious disciple, because Flamel is more conditional. Flamel is when I go to reserve from expedition zone, where studious disciple is when I leave expedition zone. Now, Spiritus does know that helping hand is in the hand for Brian, but it does require um but Flamel and Helping Hand kind of makes it harder for Brian to contest multiple lanes.
Yeah, and the good thing about him, the Studious Disciple too, is that it's a 1 cost from reserve. Flamel is a 3 cost.
Yeah,
Make Brian use a little bit more mana in general. Unfortunately for Spiritus in this situation, he doesn't really have any more token generation. Has already gone through 2 of his uniques. It would be nice to having to deal with like something like an Off You Go that he knows is available to Brian, because it doesn't really feel good to Off You Go a card, especially when there's like 6 other tokens out there, right? So um, looks like Spiritus is going to try to avoid that by just focusing on one side and just try to get a 1/1. We'll only have one more card to play here, likely to play it on the companion side, and will get some more draw. Gets a nice sticky note seal. That
that's mana
is,
for next turn.
yeah, mana for next turn, free mana. Brian will play the Baba Yaga just for the draw, knowing that nothing else is gonna get him to be able to stop Spiritus. But
And will be able to be played for cheaper, for 2 from reserve next turn. And that Helping Hand will be returning to Brian's hand because of the Flamel. So will not be
right,
discarding any value from their reserve.
yeah. So a little bit more resources available to Brian going into this next day, potential last day. Everything realistically usable that's in hand, other than the small step at the moment. But
And that Ortis spy is going to be very helpful because, as I mentioned in
yeah,
the last Aphanis game, uh, Aphanis currently only has 2 characters.
yeah,
So
and then
sabotaging that Flamel is going to
yeah,
make it impossible for for Brian to really contest that companion lane,
yep.
except for with Off You Go and Beauty Sleep. And that's not
Yeah,
contesting. That's just stopping Spiritus from contesting.
yeah, it seems like, and also just the fact that even if Brian was able to make it to next turn without having the Flamel, isn't able to recycle. So it's just going to be a really big Baba Yaga here.
Yep.
Um, uh, the question is can Brian or Spiritus get enough out on the companion side to be able to get the advance there and not worry about all the different removal interactions from Brian? We'll be able to play the Off You Go. We'll be able to play the Beauty Sleep once, but not twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Technically, we have perfect information. Spiritus doesn't know because there could be two off you goes and a beauty sleep, or off you go and beauty sleep, or one beauty sleep played twice and a second beauty sleep that would fully block up that companion expedition with the three characters.
yeah,
But the way that it is currently set up, Spiritus playing a third character in the companion expedition will win him the game.
yeah. I think that's probably he knows it's his best play either way.
Yeah.
Just based off of things available and honestly just playing the Ozma to draw potentially into next turn. If he didn't get the advance, but
Can also potentially draw a one drop. Ooh, playing the Ortis Attorney.
just for more stats potentially in case he thinks Brian has another character because he needs the additional green.
Oh, yeah, it could be because you could go Baba Yaga into helping hand in hand.
Yeah.
That would contest that. Um,
We'll see the Off You Go. No other plays other than another helping hand for Brian that they could play, but we'll look at a 1-0 here for Spiritus. It looks like enough advancing going on and getting ahead early with those two uniques to take him to the finish line.
whew.
I
And
think if
what a
I think if there
game.
was one I think if there was one more day, Brian might have taken that.
Yeah, if that banishing gate was another beauty sleep or another off you go. If
Or even another character.
yeah, then uh then Brian could have contested that companion expedition and only needed to advance once and then had the small step giant leap in hand. So that was a very close game. Just at the end, Brian not quite getting there. And we saw Brian recur, I think, 3 times off of the Studious Disciple, 2 or 3 times, and then twice off the Flamel, I believe. So just a lot of being able to get spells back into your hand.
Yeah. Running 17 spells total for Brian. So not entirely implausible that he doesn't hit a lot of characters in some scenarios. Obviously, Aonis always runs a little bit more compared to other heroes, but bit unfortunate for him there. Got behind, wasn't able to make it up, but still a good game regardless. Definitely could go to 3 games in this finals matchup.
Yeah.
Of Aonis versus Sigmar, Spiritus versus Brian, both ExAlts players, and we are going into game 2 for anyone getting in 1-0 currently for the Sigmar player of Spiritus.
And these were our 2 most represented decks in the tournament overall. Sigismar by quite a lot. I'm going to pull that up real quick. We had 16 Sigismars and 8 Aonis. Those were our 2 most represented decks, and then Tasia and Akesha at 4 each. So it's not too surprising. Though those are both very strong decks. Not so it's not surprising that we see them in the finals. Uh, but I will say I'm surprised at the lack of traced overall. Although that might be just being that might be me being biased because at PAX Unplugged last week there were so many traced, and I think three of the five tournaments had like 4 trace in top 8 each or something like that. So just
Yeah.
you know surprising to, and that could also um speak to regional metagames. ExAlts celebration, largely European. And I'm assuming most of the people who were at PAX Unplugged were from NA.
Yeah. Um, it's one of those things where, I mean, based off of your like breakdown here, like conversion rate into the top cut, it looks like Tasia had the best conversion rate if you include heroes that there's multiple of them other than just one. Like obviously, I guess you could say Nevenka had a
Nevenka has
perfect
100% conversion rate.
yeah, over, but yeah, Tasia technically the best. We are going into game 2, but yeah, it's interesting how Aonis and Sigmar are similar in that aspect. Keelan guy in the chat makes a good point as
Yeah.
far as like unique value um, within the EU setup, because I mean just access in general I think is a little bit higher than NA, and the fact that NA sucks at the moment. I'm in NA, I can say that it's fine. But yeah, it should be interesting as the game develops. There's gonna be like no disparity moving forward as far as access to cards realistically. It's just gonna be if NA is going to pick up as far as like getting more cards to have more access to them. But technically, with Marketplace eventually coming out, NA should have access to them for those who want to take a look, So,
Yeah, and then also as sets continue forward, we will have more access to more uniques. So we'll have the chance uh to so we'll have more unique effects. Like we see common things right now being in characters in Aonis trying to recur spells. Obviously very good. But there might be other uniques in the future that either have that mechanic as well, widening the ability for people to have them in their deck, or new mechanics that might be coming in future sets that could uh, lead to different play styles for these heroes.
yeah, cool play there in day 1,
Yeah.
showing the difference between going first and going second in day 1. Whereas Brian basically had to play the unique spindle harvester, and it allowed Spiritus to do the good old fashioned 1 cost play into a 2 cost teamwork training, knowing that Brian didn't have any other play at that time. So
And the teamwork training would have been that was a very good call by Spiritus, because um that would have just been free value for the Spindle Harvester getting the boost from the magical training and then immediately recurring it back to hand. But just the teamwork training ruining that value while also getting a double advance.
yeah, and so we'll probably see a similar game plan here from Spiritus, knowing that there's a potential that Brian has the low availability on playing characters. And even if he could, he can only boost one side of his expedition at a time with the Faunus's ability. potentially spreading it out with helping hand a little bit, but is looking to at least go 1-for-1 here, especially being up 2 advances on the tumult here and having a little bit of wiggle room moving forward. So we'll see if Brian can figure out a way to catch up here and get an occasional 2-0 or at least 1-0 to make sure that Spiritus doesn't run away with the second game.
Some interesting options here. Um, although the only way to be like truly mana efficient is to play the Catagaran Alchemist. Is because that's the only 3 cost available. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Catagaran Alchemist into the companion expedition, and then maybe try to teamwork training the Spindle or the Sneezer Shroom based off whichever one has more boost. Obviously, the Spindle Harvester gains more value as the game goes on because of the recursion, but also the Sneezer Shroom will have anchored, so that is getting rid of 2 turns of value instead of the one from the one immediate turn of value from the Spindle Harvester. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw teamwork training into Spindle here.
I don't know if he's gonna want to use it. He's already used one, and if he uses it now, he won't he'll only have one left in his deck.
True.
So he may just decide, yeah, go to a character here, guarantee one side instead of trying to make a big play to get a 2-0. Because he's already up. There's no need to take a risk. Save that card until later, and hold it for a game-winning play potentially.
Interesting putting the rare Spindle Harvester on the board. I feel like with a helping hand in hand, I might have been greedy and just tried to boost up my Sneezer Shroom for next turn. But Brian playing just gonna try and play a strong value game, which with we've seen he can get a lot of value from his spells and uniques.
Right. So with the 1-cost Alchemist in hand and the Cadets available, we're potentially looking at a resource play this day for Brian. Getting that Ozma out, getting a draw, and hopefully getting some more cards to play with, as well as getting in advance. Going to be a little bit harder than normal with 2 cards out for Aonis already. But could be essential to put kind of like cementing the lead that Spiritus has at the moment.
All right, and we see that instance of Catagaran Alchemist working as an after you, basically, allowing Spiritus to better see what's happening on the board. And Spiritus looking like, I am already up in expeditions, so I am willing to trade 1-for-1. I'm just going to hard commit to the hero expedition side.
The issue he's going to run into is that there's still a good amount of spells available to Brian, and with the Mage Dancer out, can build up pretty quickly, and may not even be able to get that 1 advance. He does have some leeway to not get an advance this turn, but it would be ideal. I think so. Brian's gonna play the Spindle Harvesters. We'll see at least 1 helping hand, potentially a second helping hand, potentially a magical training as well to get boost if needed. Because we're looking at what 1, 2, 3, 4 boosts needed Yeah, and so it's going to cause Spiritus to immediately use that teamwork training to prevent the helping hand happening at all.
Now, this helping hand will let Brian double advance, I'm pretty sure, because of the 3 boosts from it. Yep.
Yeah.
So that will tie up the expeditions. Uh, and Brian having a lot of card advantage at this point.
Yeah. I think still the best play, obviously, for Spiritus, taking a chance to get rid of that unique,
Yep.
and kind of seeing the writing on the wall as far as realizing that, and probably going to get 2-0'd. May as well take it as much as possible, and hopefully take the win regardless. So
Now
we'll
this
see.
now this foundry mechanic, while it is token generation the same as all of other Spiritus's uniques, this one has the condition that you need to have less than 8 mana orbs. So, Spiritus with the foundry mechanic can decide, I want to get the value from the foundry mechanic, in future turns, and just um, not put any cards into mana. But which Spiritus has a pretty low cost curve deck anyway, so might opt to do that anyways. But will have to stay at 7 mana if he wants to get value out of that foundry mechanic for future turns. Oh, interesting. So I guess Brian not valuing the sabotage over just getting a body into that companion expedition. Oh.
Yeah, a lot of bodies out here, so we will see the Ozma for some draw. Luckily, he did run into that unique to help get some token generation. I think he really needed that. But with the being able to get 2 body, I mean, realistically, it feels like if Brian's able to get out 2 bodies, a lot of the times, it's super helpful. You didn't hit that in game 1, so wasn't able to capitalize and stayed behind the entire time. But having it now is definitely beneficial in the sense of being able to produce boosts.
Now, there's a pretty good chance that uh, Spiritus will be able to play whatever he draws. Did he draw another Ozma, or is that Cam
That's bit.
just like
Must
frozen up there?
uh he must have drawn something. He didn't draw into anything else, so it must be the other Ozma.
Oh yeah, it looks like he did just draw into another Ozma.
So it works out. Being able to draw another card, I guess, but it will overload his reserve if he decides to play it.
Yeah, and then also, where do you play this to get value? Because you play it in your hero expedition, and any spell still causes Brian can still win with helping hand, can win both lanes with helping hand.
Yeah, I think you have to play it companion, kind of force
Yeah.
the decision to be made. Can at this point, helping hand will tie things up on the companion side. Um,
Will.
but
Yeah, so at this point, I believe Brian can only tie
yeah,
the companion
because of the
expedition. Even the off you go only gets them up to 4.
Yeah, it's one of those weird situations where off you go's not super helpful against those 1/1/1 bodies, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so able to tie, able to get the 1-0, which realistically it's all Brian needs at the moment, especially with how many tokens Spiritus was able to get out.
Yeah. We'll have to get rid of cards. Getting rid of 2 bodies. Well, it has the Studious Disciple in hand, so it has another body in hand. And can use that to recur any card from the from his reserve at the end of the day, or whenever it leaves the expedition zone, as long as it has 1 boost.
Spiritus does run into another unique here, the Trooper. It'd be interesting to see if it's gonna be helpful here to hopefully for them to take game 2, especially with Afanis being up. We have seen one small step from Afanis go into mana at this point, so they got about half their deck here if they're trying to run into it.
Now, yeah, Ortis Cadets, easy card to put into mana. We already have 2 token generating uniques that are better. And we want the Ortis Spy to get rid of that Katagaran Mage Dancer.
Yeah, we'll run into another situation here where Brian on the Afanis is running low on characters. We'll be able to draw a little bit to potentially find another one.
Yeah.
But they are up on the expedition, so they could also just look to advance once, and go for a 1-for-1. And it would feel dangerous for Spiritus not knowing if there is a small step available to Brian.
Either way, using magical trainings to draw, it boosts up your characters, it gets you cards in hand that can possibly get you another character to contest the companion expedition or go further in on the heroes, and will hopefully get you closer to Small Step Giant Leap. Although the amount of token generation that can happen this turn. Oh, I forgot. That Foundry mechanic no longer creates tokens. Because it is because Spiritus is now at 8 mana.
Yeah, Council Effect won't be super useful here either, but it can be used for token generation with the Trooper as a 1 cost if needed.
And support ability is the next permanent you play this afternoon costs 1 less. So that's not going to be helpful. But
Yeah.
you're right. Does create 2 recruits off of the Ortis Trooper.
Unless it gets off you go real quick.
I was going to say, I think at this point, no cards in hand. I think I just off you go. The I off you go the Ortis Trooper, trade 1-for-1.
It looks like he's going to prioritize resources and just keep on drawing with the magical training.
Yeah, I
assuming
guess
that he can just get enough stats.
Yeah, because playing the Ortis Trooper is basically 2/2/2.
Yeah.
And with another magical training Afanis boost, he'll still be able to advance. So that does that is a safer play overall and gets you closer to your 1 Small Step Giant Leap that's still in the deck.
And the biggest boon here for Brian is that forces both uniques to be exhausted this turn.
Yep.
And put Spiritus in a weird spot just in order to go 1-for-1.
And we had just to my memory, Brian won game 1, correct?
No, Spiritus took it.
Spiritus did? Okay, good.
Yeah. So we're likely looking at a game 3 here.
Ooh.
Especially with that draw.
Draws for Spiritus.
It's okay. Just play the Grand Endeavor.
play
You
Grand
win.
Endeavor, and just hope. I mean, at this point, Brian, you know, Spiritus is hoping Brian didn't get the small step giant leap, but with
Even
this
with
hand,
yeah, even without its resources are not in Spiritus's favor. Can't even activate Ozma at this point.
yeah.
So to draw into something hopefully. So not looking pretty.
Oh wait, is he? Damn. I thought he was hovering the Grand Endeavor for a moment. I was like, yes, play it
It still can play it, but probably won't.
to show off the Grand Endeavor.
Yeah, knows it's a GG here. I can't not seeing the chat, but I imagine it's probably already been called.
I was gonna say, I think, and Brian doesn't know what that last card is. Doesn't know that it's a Grand Endeavor. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
but playing the Ozma for without the draw,
Yeah,
like
bit of an
that's
indicator.
pretty heads up. That's like, okay, this is over.
Yeah, Spiritus making Brian play at the very least before hitting the GG.
Yep.
Brian giving Spiritus the sympathy advance on the token side. Um, but still game. Going into game 3, everyone that's joining us here, thanks for coming. We are 1-1 currently. Sigmar versus Aonis with Brian and Spiritus.
Yeah, and I put up the top 8 bracket for us right now, just to see how we got to our uh, final our final game of the finals. 3 Sigismar, 2 Tasia, 1 Traced, 1 Nevenka, and 1 Aonis. Uh, is it
0
only?
Bravos.
I was gonna say, is it only Bravos that's not represented?
Yeah, got 5 factions. Sucks to be Bravos. And the funny thing is, lore-wise, Beyond the Gates is supposed to be all about Bravos, right? Like Kojo's the hero. We got the celebration day because of Kojo, right?
Yep.
But it's not the case in the actual card game. The same way that like no one actually likes the 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 poster child of a lot of games is sometimes just not that good. We just
Yep.
we gotta ramp it up sometimes, just like make them overpowered, let Mario be overpowered in certain things. Let Pikachu be really good. I guess Pikachu's good in Pokemon Pocket now, right?
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
either way, you gotta help the guy out. Uh, Kojo is
Hopefully,
prob
we
Kojo is
haven't
probably
seen
the best at the moment, but
we haven't seen like any. Let me just check the reveal sheet. Oh, we have seen 3 cards from Bravo so far. So
yeah,
that is one of our factions we've seen the most cards from for the next set.
yeah.
And, you know, we'll see how the rest affects everything. I, as you said, I think it's one of the main things is just the lack of card draw.
It's just resource availability
Yeah.
for Bravos, because a lot of stuff you want to play in Bravos, you want to play from your reserve. The majority of unique effects and different things have a lot of effects associated with putting cards into reserve to activate effects. Haven's there. You want to. There's a lot of support abilities you can activate in reserve that you want to do, but the issue is when you're playing from reserve, unless you have a helping hand or something to remove fleeting, you're you're not going to get to play it again. And Bravos doesn't have card draw. Bravos doesn't have. They do have resupply, but not a lot that's utilized. And Bravos doesn't have a lot of like hero ability engines similar to Trace that can
Yeah.
function off of playing everything from reserve, right? I guess you could play ExAlts, which is kind of why I like ExAlts a lot, is because you can get card draw, and you can utilize a lot of stuff from reserve. And honestly, it just people aren't used to ExAlts most of the time, and you can get some sneaky wins.
But
But
even then, with Atsadi, you can get at max four card draw off of him, right?
yeah,
For
six,
five.
seven, eight.
Well, I guess is there a 9 cost card? Is Kaibara rare 9 cost?
Well, most of the times you'd probably be playing a unique if you want to hit
Yeah,
the higher ones, kind of thing.
because you have 5, 6, 7, 8 are basically the cards you could the hand cost that you could use to draw, right?
Yeah, and there's some 10 cost cards that you can play from unique. Kaiba the I do run the Kaibara rare in my Itzadi deck. I think I thought it was running 1 or 2, but it is a 9 cost as a rare. And I think it's probably a little bit better than the common most times because you can get the extra value from it. But yeah, you're limited obviously, but the biggest thing I've seen from Saudi as we're going into game 3 here, and I'll wrap it up quick, is you have to hit the ramp early. If you don't hit the ramp early,
Yeah.
then you're not going to do well. The biggest thing is getting so much more mana than your opponent that you can actually outplay them by after Ewing kind of a little bit with all the mana you have extra with, and then playing your big cards. But yeah, game 3 starting.
Both
One and
players with a
one.
unique.
Yeah, 1-1. We have Spiritus going first this time around. It seems like they may have figured out a way to let the players decide who goes first, potentially using the Keylon guys thing of rematch. Um, so 2 uniques now for Spiritus, similar to game 1. Uh, only one for Brian, but sometimes that's all you need with an Aonis is to have that one unique available.
And most important, the early Foundry mechanic. Because as we saw last game, that gets turned off at 8 mana. So if there's any unique you'd rather see early than later, it's that one.
Unfortunately for him, though, Brian does have that off you go available to kind of counter it immediately if that is the decision. Because I imagine, but we also may just see other cards being played. And oh, he gets rid of the off you go.
Yeah,
Little does he know
Brian's
that
hand a bit awkward. Just trying to
yeah,
find a way to really make it playable.
yeah,
So
little does he know it would have been nice to have, but looks like maybe offering up a sacrificial alchemist here, and we might even see the conjuring seal being played here just for resources.
yeah, but that would,
It'll definitely give up a 2-0, but
yeah.
maybe playing for late game, we'll see.
I'm also just not sure if there's any way to avoid a 2-0 at this point.
Could play the other alchemist to try to stack up one side. Doesn't know, obviously, teamwork training is available, but
Yeah, Foundry Mechanic plus. I mean, uh, well, Baba Yaga. Oh no, there's two. There's two left. Oh
yeah. Yeah, that's how the cookie crumbles a little bit with removal. Keelan guys mentioning like removal sucks sometimes into Sigismar, sometimes you need it. But yeah, gotta love the go wide strategies. We saw it last game too. That even though Brian took it, there's some scenarios where like, oh, I could take care of a character here, but it really does no good because they're all 1-1-1-1, and it wouldn't do any good in helping me advance the expedition. So.
Uh, so because Spiritus is not competing in Forest, not able to advance even though having the 5 over the 4 there, but is able to stall Brian from advancing.
Yep. We see Spiritus take the be happy with taking the lead, have plenty of resources available. We'll be able to get the Amelia Earhart before Brian could sabotage it potentially. So I'll be curious to see if Brian chooses to keep the sabotage, assuming that he may not get to play it this turn immediately. So, because that Baba Yaga feels nice, has been keeping that Conjuring Seal, and you're definitely not getting rid of that Spindle Harvester.
Yeah.
So we may be looking at the sabotage getting to go away here.
Again, the hand's just not, being kind of awkward for Brian. Hasn't had great mana curves overall, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like you have to kind of resource either the Tooth Fairy or the Conjuring Seal at this point.
Yeah. I
But
I
yeah,
oh, looking
going
to
with the
mana
Yaga.
the Baba Yaga. I don't know. My instinct is Conjuring Seal, and then hope to draw something off the Baba Yaga, but that's still,
Brian seems
that.
dedicated to the Conjuring Seal. Like, definitely had the opportunity to mana it earlier too, but has decided to keep it.
Yeah.
So obviously a integral part of the game plan for Brian with not getting rid of it and almost treating it like a small step in a way. But we'll see if it ends up working for him. A lot of resources still available for Spiritus. Has another unique with that mechanic that you were talking about as well.
Yep. Well, and the thing is, any character, with the way it works out, any character that Brian tries to play, he has the Spiritus has the teamwork training in hand. Probably doesn't want to commit it right now because it doesn't seem like he's going to need to. But that is there as an option. Um, and of course, and that Frog Prince going into the perfect expedition for him.
The Lone Frog Prince as well.
Now, at this point, if you play Baba Yaga there and put the Ortis Recruit there, you're still not competing in Forest. So, a helping hand would keep you from advancing, but it still would only tie.
Yeah, and it would make things a little bit difficult for the reserve resource wise.
Yeah, so just force Brian to play into awkward spots, not have perfect. Oh, it seems like they're finally manning the Conjuring Seal.
Yeah. At this point, being this far down, you can't really afford to give up
Yeah.
too much, so you got to get rid of it. It's been really weird with Brian. Has had that unique spindle harvester available, but obviously hasn't been able to utilize it with some small cost spells. Haven't seen Helping Hand, haven't seen the Beauty Sleep until recently either. So, like you
And
said,
haven't seen any magical training.
yeah, been super awkward for Brian. Whereas Spiritus has run into two uniques at this point, similar to game one. Sometimes that's just how it happens.
Yep.
For everyone still watching that may have just joined, we are in game 3 of the ExAlts Celebration Season 3 Finals. Spiritus versus Brian. And you'll see how it's going thus far. Looking pretty good for Spiritus.
Now, that Foundry mechanic can play in Target Expedition. So, the Ortis Trooper, the unique Ortis Trooper that is in Spiritus's deck, has all tokens generated by it have to be played in its own expedition. So, but because Foundry mechanic is Target Expedition, can really just pop into most of the power into the hero expedition, and then put in Oris recruit in the companion to force Brian to contest it. Now, we'll enough mana left over for beauty sleep. Put the counter on Spindle Harvester and get that beauty sleep back. But this, with that charge in hand, and then also the teamwork training,
yeah,
is very versatile. And Spiritus will have full information at this point because Brian's tapped out.
Yeah, and with not knowing that the teamwork training is available is going to give the boost to the Spindle to be efficient and hopefully return the beauty sleep.
But the charge just wins it for him here. Wins it for Spiritus, I believe.
Question.
Because it'll be 4 on companion,
yep.
And then it'll be 7 on hero,
yep.
For the relevant expeditions.
And we'll have a slept Baba Yaga available next turn as well.
So it will be 6, yeah, because of the Baba Yaga. But yeah, that's whew. Oh wait, no, this is not game yet. There's still one more expedition.
Yeah, no, he'll still have the Baba Yaga for next turn. But not looking ideal for Brian. Is able to return the beauty sleep.
I thought for a second that that was game over.
No. Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was 3 expeditions apart, not 2. But this is a heavy deficit to come back from for Brian.
Yeah, having another teamwork training as well is giving him options here. Is it even gonna resource it? Feels like doesn't even need it realistically. Is just gonna focus to get the 1 advance and use the teamwork training as probably the final play to just knock out whatever character is available to Brian. We'll only have 2 characters to be able to play at this point. And yeah, a lot of hand draw from the very beginning has been lining up kind of perfectly for Sigmar, as Keelan Guy was saying. So unfortunate for Brian a little bit, but needless to say, a good match overall.
I find it a bit interesting that Spiritus decided to put the foundry mechanic in the hero expedition. Just because I feel like the only I don't know. I feel like the only way for Brian to really come back would be for him to get the anchored Spindle Harvester into the companion expedition and then somehow contest both lanes. But I don't know.
Yeah, at this point, Spiritus can just stack one side and then just have 1 token on the other side, and then just remove whatever with teamwork training, right? And if they don't win on one side, then they just have 1 token uncontested on the other potentially. So I'm sure there's a lot of different outs here for Spiritus, to be honest. Being this far up, realistically, they could just decide to not advance and resource up and set themselves up kind of thing if they wanted to, with Brian being this far behind. So a lot of different options. We'll probably see this as the final day, though, going in this game 3. Yeah. Hitting the 1 cost Paper Herald too was nice, so now they can just wait 1 more turn before playing that teamwork training. Brian seeing the writing on the wall.
Yep.
We'll be able to play another beauty sleep, but it's not going to matter We get the GGs, it looks like.
A little bit of a lackluster game 3 in such a good match. But I mean, congrats to both players. Well done.
Yep. Good one for Spiritus. Hit some good setup for hand draw where I think they didn't hit it as much in game 2. Similar situation game 1, but obviously a lot closer. But fun game. Congrats, ExAlts in general. Both players in finals, and a good tournament for us all to watch.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to the ExAlts in general for organizing this tournament. I believe there's one more season, season 4, and then the top two or top 4 from each of the seasons will then have a championship match, a championship top cut, basically. So if you want to be a part of that, there is still one more season celebration for Beyond the Gates. I believe that will be happening early January, and then the final championship happening mid to late January, right before Trial by Frost comes out. So if you want to do that, feel free to get in there. It is, as Blue knows, very EU time friendly, not NA time friendly. We are hoping in Trial by Frost to have an NA as well, just so that people don't have to play at 2 a.m. But that is still in the works, and it won't happen before Trial by Frost, I believe.
Don't let that deter you. We had
Dobby came in second
last season, hanging out here with me in California. Big state though, so I live nowhere near him. But yeah, it's should be a good one regardless for season 3. And then obviously for the final celebration, or season 4 rather, and then final celebration. But yeah, fun event. Once again, thanks to the ExAlts folks for having me and us for the stream. We had Pandy Andy take care of the Swiss rounds with the super long stream there, so appreciate him for taking that one. He's in EU though, so he's fine. He can take a Saturday to do that. But yeah.
Morgan, yes, Trickster did compete in this. Trickster is also a member of the ExAlts and was a winner of one of their first tournaments. Did compete in this on Waru, but did not make top cut. I don't know what Trickster's record was. But did compete in this one. But is also on West Coast of NA, so was playing at mainly like midnight to 6 a.m. I think was the time zones for you guys.
Yeah. I think a lot of his stuff is probably not working out ideally for time wise and availability in general. Not I think a lot of the content creators on the altered side of things, it's not like we're doing this full time. So
Yep.
we gotta have some semblance of making other money so we can make amazing content for all of you lovely folks.
Speaking of amazing content,
but yeah,
check that link in the chat. Head on over to Blue Oak TV if you are interested in tournaments, tournament coverage, and tournament interviews. There's no one better. I should at least say in English. I don't know the French scene, but there's no one better than Blue Oak TV to check all that stuff out at.
Appreciate it.
If you're already here, this is my channel, so you're already here. It's one button. You don't even have to click anywhere else.
Yeah, just look straight down. Hit the subscribe button.
But we want to thank you both for watching, and as we go into into a new year, into a new set, also into a reveal season for Trial by Frost. If you enjoy the game of Altered, if you want to see it thrive, help support your local content creators. Watch their videos, give them likes, help grow this community so that we can show the larger world how good this game is and how much fun it is. Yeah, that's my little plea right now, is to, and if you enjoy this game and you want to make content for it, go out and do it. And let us know so that we can shout you out as well.
Yeah, for sure. We're all about helping each other out here, especially in we need all the folks available to want to play the game in general. All those European players, they're already got a bunch of people going on over there. Looking at the maps as far as local events, they got a lot. You guys do have a good amount over on East Coast in general, but always can have more regardless of where it is at. U.S. and North America as a whole is a big space. So the more the merrier, whether it is individual players or content folks as a whole. A lot of good stuff upcoming. I know Guy Trying here has some good stuff coming here soon. I do as well. So keep tuned, subscribe, and enjoy these streams while you can.
Last time we had an interview with one of the with the second place Dobby, because he was from NA. I believe both of our finalists this time were from EU. So I have not been contacted. Let me double check. I don't think I've been contacted by production about an interview. So I don't think we're going to do one this time. I am going to quickly just try to show the what the final bracket ended up looking like. Do you have any other things you want to? I know we kind of just did a huge shout out moment, but anything else you want to shout out or discuss, Blue, while I get this ready?
Nothing in particular. I mean, while you're getting the bracket set up, we can talk about it just as a final wrap up. Kind of like we mentioned before, Tasia and Sigmar were the big heroes going into everything. Had equal setup into as far as conversion into the top cut. We do see Sigmar take the finals overall against the Aonis. Yeah, I mean, cool to see the Nevenka as far as something a little bit different. Good representation of all the factions minus Bravos, because Bravos needs help severely. Hopefully we see it in the next expansion, but past that, congratulations to Spiritus of the ExAlts team, and thanks to the ExAlts team as a whole.
All right. I think that's going to be a wrap on this for us. I want to once again thank you for watching. If you watch live, if you're watching in the VOD or anything, also thank you. But most of all, and thank the ExAlts again. But most of all, I want to thank Blue Oak for braving the early morning and helping me commentate. Much better to talk to someone than talk to myself.
Yeah, always good to talk to someone. Talk to myself enough. So,
all right. Thank you all for joining.